The 5-second rule says that food is safe to eat if you pick it up within 5 seconds after dropping it. It's one of the most commonly repeated and completely false beliefs people follow without thinking. The rule implies that germs need time to contaminate your food, so if you're fast enough, you beat them. It sounds just scientific enough to feel real, but microbiology doesn't work that way. Studies show that bacteria can transfer to food instantly, often in less than a second. Researchers tested different foods and different surfaces, from tile to carpet to stainless steel. They measured contamination after 1, 5, 30, and 60 seconds. The results were consistent. Time didn't matter nearly as much as surface condition and food type. Moist foods like watermelon picked up more bacteria than dry foods like crackers, but even the driest food was contaminated immediately if the surface was dirty. The myth likely stuck around because it feels comforting. Nobody wants to throw away food they just dropped. The phrase gives people a mental excuse. It's easier to believe you've avoided risk if you're quick, but germs don't care how fast you move. They don't wait for a timer, they're already there. And when food touches a contaminated surface, bacteria start moving on contact. It's not about delay, it's about contact. People sometimes say, "I've eaten food off the floor for years and never got sick." That's anecdotal. Not all bacteria make you sick. Some contact might be harmless, but sometimes it is. E. coli, salmonella, and other pathogens are invisible and dangerous even in tiny amounts. Just because you didn't get sick doesn't mean the rule works, it just means you got lucky. Floors can look clean and still carry harmful microbes, and your shoes bring in germs from the outside world. Pets, spilled food, dust, and other people all contribute. When researchers swabbed household floors, even in kitchens and living rooms, they found bacteria living their days or weeks after cleaning. The idea that 5 seconds offers protection is made up. There's no scientific basis for a grace period. Germs don't operate on human time. They don't delay because you're watching. The belief gives people a sense of control, but it's misplaced. The only real factor is surface cleanliness. If the floor is clean, the risk is low. If it's not, the food is contaminated no matter how quickly you act. The rule sounds useful, but it's a myth. If you drop food and eat it, that's your call. But you're gambling on what was already on the ground, not how long it stayed there. The 5-second rule doesn't protect your food. It just makes your decision feel easier. Goldfish are often used as a joke for forgetfulness. The myth says they have a memory span of just 3 seconds, swimming in endless circles with no awareness of where they've been. It's one of the most widespread and deeply wrong assumptions people have about animals. The idea sounds cute and simple, which is probably why it spread, but goldfish are far smarter than we give them credit for. Scientific studies have shown that goldfish can remember information for weeks, and in some cases, months. In one experiment, goldfish were trained to associate a sound with feeding. Weeks later, they still responded to the same sound. That's memory. Other studies trained goldfish to complete mazes, press levers, and distinguish between shapes and colors. They passed. They adapted. They learned. You can't do that in 3 seconds. The myth likely started because goldfish live in small bowls, don't express emotions like mammals, and repeat their movements. To a human observer, it looks like they're forgetting, but that's our projection. The behavior of fish is subtle. It doesn't mean it's thoughtless. In reality, goldfish have cognitive abilities that support learning, spatial memory, and pattern recognition. They remember where food appears. They recognize their caretakers. They return to the same locations inside their tanks. One study even trained goldfish to press a lever at a specific time of day, proving they can track time intervals and associate them with outcomes. That's not reflex, that's memory. The myth also persists because people underestimate animals that don't act like them. If it doesn't have facial expressions or complex vocalizations, we assume it lacks intelligence. But that's not how biology works. Intelligence is adapted to environment. Goldfish don't need to write poetry to remember food locations. Their brains work in ways that support their needs. The 3-second claim is not just incorrect, it's dismissive. It undercuts decades of observation and scientific data. Your goldfish might not react with excitement when you walk in the room, but it still knows who you are. It knows feeding times. It knows its space. The real problem is how casually we accept convenient assumptions about creatures we don't understand. The truth is simple. Goldfish remember, they learn, and their world is richer than we imagine. The myth isn't about what fish forget, it's about what we fail to see. People believe that sugar causes hyperactivity in children. It's repeated at birthday parties, in parenting advice, and on school playgrounds. A child eats cake, runs around laughing, and someone says, "They're on a sugar high." It feels like a perfect cause and effect relationship, but it's not true. Study after study has shown that sugar does not cause hyperactivity in children. In one experiment, parents were told their children had consumed sugar when they hadn't. The parents still rated their kids as more active, more impulsive, and harder to manage. The children hadn't changed. The parents' expectations had. Sugar isn't a stimulant in the way caffeine is. It doesn't flood the brain with chemicals that cause erratic behavior. What it does do is raise blood sugar, sometimes followed by a mild crash, but that's a metabolic response, not a behavioral trigger. The myth likely survives because of context. When kids consume sugar, it's usually during exciting events, birthdays, holidays, sleepovers, school treats. The environment is already chaotic. The sugar gets blamed for the energy, but the party is the real source. Children respond to stimulation, novelty, and freedom. And when we expect sugar to cause problems, we're more likely to see what confirms our bias. That's called confirmation bias, and it affects parents, teachers, and caregivers. The science doesn't show hyperactivity. It shows perception. Sugar in moderate amounts has no consistent behavioral effect, and if it did, we'd see the same patterns in adults. But adults drink sugary soda and eat desserts all the time without running in circles or bouncing on couches. We don't call it a sugar high when a grown-up eats a donut. We shouldn't for kids either. That doesn't mean sugar is harmless. High sugar intake over time is linked to health issues like obesity, diabetes, and mood instability. But in the short term, it's not the reason children are hyper. Their brains are already wired for motion, curiosity, and emotion. They're energetic by nature. The sugar myth survives because it gives adults something to point to, something to manage, but the behavior isn't in the frosting, it's in the moment. The excitement, the attention, the sleep cycle, the overstimulation, that's what drives it. Sugar is just part of the setting. The next time you see a child getting loud after cake, ask yourself what else is happening. The answer probably isn't in the icing, it's in the room. We only use 10% of our brain. That's one of the most widespread and completely wrong beliefs repeated in everyday conversation. It suggests that the vast majority of our brain is inactive, just sitting there unused, waiting to be unlocked. It sounds empowering, as if we're carrying around hidden potential we haven't tapped into yet, but neuroscience tells a very different story. Brain scans using technologies like fMRI and PET imaging show that nearly every part of the brain is active at different times depending on the task at hand. Even while you're resting, your brain is maintaining body temperature, regulating hormones, processing memories, and more. There are no large areas that just sit dark. Simple actions like walking or listening to music light up multiple regions. More complex tasks, like solving a problem or recalling an emotional memory, involve even more areas firing at once. The idea that 90% of your brain is idle isn't just incorrect, it ignores how biologically expensive the brain is. The brain accounts for about 2% of your body's weight, but it uses roughly 20% of your body's energy. Evolution doesn't support wasted resources. If most of your brain truly did nothing, it would shrink over generations because of how much energy it consumes. Instead, it's been refined over millions of years to perform a huge range of functions. The myth likely stuck around because it gives people hope. It makes us feel like geniuses in waiting, like we could wake up one day and unlock superpowers if only we knew how. Pop culture helped. Movies, books, and motivational speakers have all leaned into the idea, often using it to sell shortcuts to intelligence or creativity. But real intelligence doesn't come from activating unused regions. It comes from developing the areas you already use every day, and those areas are already working harder than you think. Different brain regions have different jobs. The occipital lobe handles vision, the motor cortex controls movement, the prefrontal cortex helps with decision-making. These regions don't all fire at once, but they're far from unused. They engage as needed depending on what you're doing. That's not inefficiency, that's precision. Saying we only use 10% of the brain is like saying you only use 10% of a light switch because it's not always flipped on. The truth is, your brain is more like a complex orchestra. Not every instrument plays every note, but each one is essential to the performance. And together, they create the full symphony of your thoughts, memories, emotions, and actions. You're not walking around with 90% of your brain turned off. You're using it in ways that are already staggeringly complex. The myth is appealing. The science is more impressive. People say that if you touch a baby bird, the mother will smell your scent and abandon it. It's a common warning repeated to children who find fledglings on the ground. The message is simple: don't interfere or the baby bird will be rejected. But this isn't how birds behave. The myth sounds believable because humans tend to overestimate the role of smell in animal parenting. But most birds have a poor sense of smell. They don't identify their chicks by scent the way mammals might. They rely far more on sound, movement, and location. If a baby bird falls out of the nest and you place it back in, the parent usually continues caring for it as long as the nest remains safe. Ornithologists, experts in bird behavior, routinely handle chicks during research and conservation efforts, and the parents return without hesitation. Birds are not emotionally fragile in that way. They don't abandon their young over human scent. The myth may have started as a way to teach children not to touch wildlife, which is a reasonable message on its own. Wild animals shouldn't be disturbed unnecessarily, and people can sometimes do more harm than good, but using a false consequence, like permanent rejection by the mother, misinforms more than it protects. In truth, birds are devoted parents. Many species will continue to feed and care for their chicks even in stressful environments. Some birds even tolerate humans monitoring their nests for long periods without abandoning them. And baby birds that seem to be abandoned on the ground are often just in the fledgling stage, learning to fly with parents watching nearby. Picking them up and moving them can sometimes interfere more than help. But if a chick is clearly too young, has fallen from a nest, and the nest is reachable, gently returning it is usually the best action. The mother won't reject it because you touched it. She probably won't even notice. The myth survives because it simplifies a complex behavior into a simple warning, but understanding how animals really operate leads to better choices. You should avoid unnecessary handling of wildlife, but not because of scent rejection. Do it because minimal interference is usually safer. The truth is, birds aren't sniffing your fingerprints. They're looking for their chick, and most of the time they'll keep taking care of it even if you've helped. Many people believe that shaving causes hair to grow back thicker, darker, or faster. It's a common assumption that starts early and persists into adulthood. Someone shaves their arm or leg and notices that the regrowth feels rougher. The conclusion seems obvious: the razor changed the hair. But biologically, shaving doesn't affect how hair grows. Hair thickness, color, and growth rate are controlled by genetics and hormones, not by razors. When you shave, you cut the hair at the surface of the skin. That creates a blunt edge, which feels stiffer as it grows out compared to the natural tapered tip. This can give the illusion of increased thickness. But under a microscope, the diameter of the hair hasn't changed. It just feels different because of the way it was cut. Studies have confirmed this over and over. In one experiment, men shaved sections of their legs repeatedly over several months. Researchers found no difference in the thickness, color, or speed of hair growth compared to unshaved areas. The regrown hair looked and behaved the same. The myth likely survives because the blunt edge feels more noticeable and because people are paying closer attention to the area they shaved. We tend to check for regrowth, which makes us more aware of every hair. That awareness reinforces the belief, but the razor has no impact on the follicle beneath the skin. That's where hair growth is regulated, deep inside the skin, where the blade never reaches. Hormones like testosterone can affect how much hair you grow and where it appears, which is why body hair changes during puberty or pregnancy. But razors don't cause hormonal changes. They don't trigger growth signals. They simply cut what's already there. The myth also spreads because of visible timing. A teenager might shave for the first time during puberty and then notice hair getting thicker afterward. But that change was already happening because of hormone shifts. The shaving just coincided with it. Shaving doesn't increase the number of hair follicles. It doesn't make them stronger. It just trims the hair that's already grown. Once you understand that, the illusion fades. Your hair isn't changing because you shaved. It's behaving exactly as biology designed it to. The belief makes sense emotionally, but scientifically it's unsupported. If your hair feels thicker after shaving, it's because of texture, not transformation. The edge is blunt, not tapered. And that's the only difference. Your razor is not secretly reprogramming your follicles. It's just cutting what was already there. You can't fold a piece of paper more than 7 times. That's what people say. It's one of those facts that gets repeated with such confidence that few even question it. Supposedly, no matter the size or strength of the person, 7 folds is the physical limit. It sounds like a fun quirk of physics, a trivial curiosity with a definite number, but it isn't true. The idea likely came from experiments with standard-sized sheets of paper, like A4 or printer paper. When folded in half repeatedly, the sheet quickly becomes too thick and too small to keep folding by hand. By the 7th fold, it resists further compression and the person gives up. But that's a limitation of materials and human strength, not of mathematical law. In 2002, a high school student named Brittany Gallivan challenged this so-called rule. She used a long roll of thin toilet paper and calculated the amount of paper needed to fold it 12 times. Then she actually did it. She proved not only that it was possible, but also developed a mathematical formula that predicted the minimum length of paper required to fold a sheet in half a given number of times. The key factor isn't the number of folds. It's the ratio between the paper's thickness and its length. Each fold doubles the number of layers, which doubles the required force and the amount of paper needed. So the number 7 isn't magical, it's just where standard paper tends to fail. If you start with a large enough sheet and use thin enough material, you can exceed it, and that's been done. Gallivan reached 12 folds. Later attempts with specialized machines reached over 13. This myth survives because it feels like a strange universal truth. It's simple, specific, and sounds tested. But like many myths, it's based on limited experience, not on physics. The paper doesn't know when it's been folded 7 times. It doesn't stop obeying geometry. It simply resists because of compounding thickness and insufficient surface area. People mistake resistance for impossibility. The truth is, folding paper isn't limited by some inherent rule. It's limited by material properties and starting conditions. The idea that you can't fold paper more than 7 times is a myth, not because folding is easy, but because the real limits are far more flexible than we assumed. 7 is not a barrier. It's just the point where most people stop. Red makes bulls angry. That's the image most people have in mind when they think of bullfighting. The matador waves a red cape, the bull charges, and everyone assumes the color red is what triggers the rage. It's such a deeply rooted idea that people avoid wearing red around cattle, as if color alone could provoke aggression. But bulls aren't angered by red. In fact, they can't even see it. Bulls, like most cattle, are red-green colorblind. Their vision doesn't detect red the way humans do. The red cape used in bullfighting, called a muleta, is a tradition, not a weapon. The bull isn't reacting to color, it's reacting to movement. When the matador waves the cape, it moves erratically in front of the bull's field of vision. That sudden motion is what triggers the charge, not the shade of the cloth. Studies have shown that bulls respond similarly to movement of any color. If the matador waved a blue or white cloth in the same pattern, the bull would charge just the same. The myth probably stuck because red looks dramatic to human eyes. It stands out in the arena. It looks intense and emotional, so people assume it has an effect, but that's projection. We assign symbolic meaning to color, passion, anger, danger, and believe animals feel it too. But bulls don't share our emotional associations with color. Their aggression in the ring is a result of provocation, stress, and being placed in a hostile environment, not a reaction to hue. What really causes the bull to charge is a mix of visual movement and defensive instinct. It's reacting to a threat, not a fashion choice. Bullfighting rituals solidified the red cape as part of the performance because it hides blood, not because it affects the animal. The tradition stuck and the myth followed. Red became the scapegoat. But the truth is, bulls aren't angered by red because they don't see red. Their brains process visual input differently. They react to what moves, not what glows. The idea that bulls hate red is based on human perception, not animal behavior. Color has meaning to us, but to a bull, motion means threat, and that's what matters. Vaccines cause autism. That's the claim that sparked one of the most dangerous and widely debunked health myths of the modern era. It's been repeated on television, in celebrity interviews, on social media, and even in courtrooms. It's caused fear, confusion, and mistrust in modern medicine, but it's not true. The claim began with a single study published in 1998 by Andrew Wakefield, which suggested a possible link between the MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, rubella, and autism. The paper was immediately controversial, and for good reason. It was based on a small sample size of just 12 children. The methodology was flawed, the data was selectively reported, and the conclusions were speculative. Over time, deeper investigations uncovered ethical violations, undisclosed financial conflicts of interest, and outright manipulation of results. The study was retracted in full by the journal that published it. Wakefield lost his medical license. Multiple large-scale studies were conducted afterward on hundreds of thousands of children across multiple countries. None of them found a link between vaccines and autism. None. The scientific consensus is clear and global. Vaccines do not cause autism, so why does the myth persist? Because fear spreads faster than fact. The timing of autism diagnosis often overlaps with the age when children receive vaccinations. This creates a false association. Parents searching for answers can easily misconnect events that happen close together. It's human to seek cause and effect, but correlation is not causation. And in this case, the link has been disproven over and over again. Vaccines are among the most studied and monitored medical tools in history. They save millions of lives every year. They've nearly eradicated deadly diseases like polio and smallpox. Autism, meanwhile, is a complex neurodevelopmental condition with genetic and environmental factors still being studied. But one thing is certain, vaccines are not on that list. The harm caused by this myth goes beyond fear. It has led to falling vaccination rates, the return of preventable diseases, and unnecessary deaths. The myth isn't just wrong, it's dangerous. Trust in medicine depends on facts, not rumors, and the facts on this are solid. Vaccines do not cause autism. They prevent illness, protect communities, and save lives. Organic food is automatically healthier. That's what many people believe when they see the word organic on a label. It's associated with purity, quality, safety, and better nutrition. Supermarkets dedicate entire sections to organic products, and prices often jump based on that one word. The assumption is that organic equals superior, but that's not always the case. Organic food is grown without synthetic pesticides, herbicides, or fertilizers. That's a fact. But the absence of synthetics doesn't guarantee the absence of chemicals. Organic farms often use natural pesticides, like copper sulfate or neem oil, which can still have environmental or health impacts. Natural doesn't always mean better or safer. The idea that organic food is nutritionally superior has been tested repeatedly, and most large-scale reviews show no consistent difference in vitamin or mineral content between organic and conventional produce. Sometimes the difference is there, sometimes it's not, but it's rarely large enough to matter biologically. What does matter more is how fresh the food is, how it's stored, and how it's prepared. A 2-week-old organic apple has less nutritional value than a fresh non-organic one. The belief also overlooks the fact that organic farming can still involve soil additives, crop rotation chemicals, and permitted natural sprays. The regulation defines what can be used, not what isn't used at all. An organic certification is a legal standard, not a health guarantee. In blind taste tests, most people can't reliably distinguish between organic and conventional food. The difference they perceive is often linked to branding, expectation, or price. That's not to say organic farming has no value. It can be better for soil health, biodiversity, and in some cases for reducing environmental runoff. But those are ecosystem benefits, not automatic health upgrades for consumers. The myth persists because people want simple answers. They want to feel in control of what they eat, and the organic label offers that. It becomes shorthand for goodness, but nutrition is complex, health is multifactorial, and safety doesn't come from a sticker, it comes from context. Washing vegetables, varying your diet, and limiting ultra-processed foods do far more than choosing between organic or not. Organic farming can be part of a sustainable food system, but that doesn't mean everything labeled organic is better for your body. The truth is, organic tells you how it was grown, not how healthy it is. Alcohol kills brain cells. It's a warning often given to teenagers, a reason to avoid drinking, and a statement used to explain memory lapses after a night out. It sounds dramatic, scientific, and permanent, but it's not accurate. Moderate alcohol use doesn't kill brain cells. What it does do is affect how brain cells communicate. It interferes with neurotransmitters, slows down processing, impairs judgment, and reduces coordination. But it doesn't wipe out neurons one by one. Even heavy drinkers don't typically lose brain cells in the literal sense. What happens instead is more subtle. Long-term alcohol abuse can damage the connections between brain cells, shrink brain tissue, and reduce the brain's white matter, which affects communication pathways. It can lead to cognitive decline over time, but that's due to structural changes, not neuron death. In extreme cases, alcohol abuse can cause a condition called Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, often linked to vitamin B1 thiamine deficiency. This condition can cause memory problems and neurological damage, but again, the problem is not direct cell death from alcohol. It's the result of nutrient depletion and long-term damage. The myth that alcohol kills brain cells likely started because people needed a concrete way to describe the foggy, slow, disoriented feeling that comes with intoxication. Saying your brain is shutting down or your cells are dying sounded like a powerful deterrent, but it's not how the brain works. Neurons are resilient. They adapt, recover, and rewire. After a single night of drinking, you might feel cloudy or forgetful, but your brain isn't missing parts. It's recovering from temporary interference. That said, alcohol is not harmless. Chronic abuse alters brain function, changes behavior, and increases the risk of depression and anxiety. It can also contribute to long-term neurological problems, especially if combined with poor diet and lack of sleep. But it doesn't melt your brain cells like acid. The damage is gradual, structural, and behavioral. The real danger is in patterns: how often, how much, and how early. The myth oversimplifies the risk. It turns a slow, complex process into a one-sentence scare tactic, but understanding how alcohol truly affects the brain helps people make smarter decisions. It's not about cell death, it's about connection loss, and those connections matter. You can catch up on lost sleep during weekends. It's a comforting belief for people who stay up late, work long hours, or push through the week on little rest. The idea is simple. If you miss sleep Monday through Friday, you can just sleep in on Saturday and Sunday to fix the damage. But that's not how sleep works. Sleep isn't stored like money in a bank. You can't save it up in advance or withdraw it later. Missing sleep has immediate effects: slower reaction time, reduced focus, impaired memory, and weakened immune function. And while sleeping more on the weekend might make you feel better temporarily, it doesn't erase the long-term damage of chronic sleep deprivation. Studies show that even after a few nights of extra weekend sleep, people don't fully recover cognitive performance, mood balance, or metabolic health. One weekend can't undo 5 days of disruption. And worse, sleeping in on weekends can shift your circadian rhythm, your internal body clock. That makes it harder to fall asleep and wake up at regular times during the week. It's called social jet lag. It's the same effect you get from changing time zones every Friday and Monday. Your body doesn't reset instantly. It stays confused. Over time, this leads to fragmented sleep, lower energy levels, and difficulty concentrating. The myth survives because people do feel better after sleeping in. That's real. But feeling better is not the same as full recovery. Your brain and body need consistent, high-quality sleep, not occasional overcorrection. Sleep debt builds slowly, and like credit card debt, small payments don't erase it. The real solution isn't more sleep on weekends, it's more stability every day. Going to bed and waking up at the same time, even on weekends, leads to deeper rest and better health outcomes. That doesn't mean you can't ever sleep in, but it does mean you shouldn't rely on it to balance your week. The truth is, sleep isn't flexible in the way we wish it was. You can't undo the cost. You can only avoid adding more. Cracking your knuckles causes arthritis. That's what people say when they hear the sound, often followed by a wince or a scolding. It's repeated by parents, teachers, even doctors in casual conversation. The idea is that the pop you hear is somehow damaging the joint, and that over time it leads to arthritis. But there's no scientific evidence to support that claim. Cracking your knuckles doesn't cause arthritis. The sound you hear isn't from bones grinding or ligaments snapping. It's caused by the rapid release of gas bubbles from the synovial fluid inside the joint. When you stretch or pull the joint apart, pressure decreases in the fluid, allowing gases like nitrogen to form a bubble. That bubble then collapses or bursts, producing the familiar cracking sound. This process isn't harmful. In fact, it's been studied for decades. One of the most famous personal experiments came from Dr. Donald Unger, who cracked the knuckles of his left hand every day for over 60 years while leaving the right hand alone. He reported no difference between the two in terms of arthritis or joint problems. His self-study may not be rigorous science, but multiple controlled studies have since supported the same conclusion. Cracking your knuckles does not increase your risk of arthritis. That doesn't mean it's entirely without consequence. Excessive knuckle cracking can sometimes lead to mild hand swelling or reduced grip strength, especially if done forcefully or repetitively. But those effects are minimal and not linked to joint disease. The myth likely survives because the sound itself is unpleasant to many people. It's loud, sudden, and associated with discomfort, even if it doesn't actually hurt. So we assume something bad is happening. It also fits into a familiar moral pattern. Small bad habits today will lead to bigger consequences tomorrow. But in this case, the outcome just doesn't match the fear. Arthritis is caused by many factors: age, genetics, injury, autoimmune conditions, but not by cracking your knuckles. The joints don't degrade from the occasional pop. They return to normal shortly after. The body doesn't treat that sound as trauma. The truth is simple. The sound is harmless, the motion is benign, and the belief is false. You might still find it annoying, that's fine, but it won't cause arthritis. People are born right or left-handed. That's the belief most of us grow up with, that handedness is hardwired at birth, that you're either right-handed, left-handed, or maybe ambidextrous, and that it never really changes. It feels like a fixed part of who you are, like eye color or blood type. But the reality is more complex. Handedness isn't entirely determined at birth. There are genetic influences. Certain genes do seem to play a role in hand preference, but it's not absolute. Identical twins who share the same DNA can have different dominant hands. That tells us environment and development matter just as much. Handedness develops over time, especially in early childhood. Most babies use both hands interchangeably for their first year. Gradually, they begin to favor one over the other. This preference becomes more stable between ages 3 and 5, but even then, it can continue shifting. Some children are encouraged, consciously or not, to use their right hand more often, especially in cultures where right-handedness is seen as standard or polite. For centuries, left-handed children were retrained to write with their right hand. That social pressure skewed data and masked natural variation. In some countries, that practice continued well into the 20th century. Brain imaging shows that hand preference is linked to asymmetry in the motor cortex, but it's also affected by how people learn to use tools, hold objects, or imitate others. Handedness isn't just a genetic switch, it's a mix of biology, experience, and culture. Even people who are strongly right or left-handed often use their non-dominant hand for certain tasks. A left-handed person might use scissors with their right hand or throw with their left, but eat with their right. That's not inconsistency, it's adaptation. True ambidexterity is rare, but functional ambidexterity is common, and hand dominance can shift with injury, training, or necessity. Some people teach themselves to write with both hands, others adjust after an accident. So while you might be born with a tendency, it's not destiny. The myth persists because it simplifies identity. One label, one category, one explanation, but handedness is more fluid than that. It's not locked in at birth, it's shaped over time. The truth is, you're not stamped as right or left-handed from day one, you grow into it. Camels store water in their humps. It's one of the most widely believed facts about animals, repeated in classrooms, documentaries, and trivia games. The image is vivid, a desert animal with a built-in water tank on its back, ready to survive days without a drink. But it's not true. Camels don't store water in their humps. The humps are actually made of fat, not liquid. These fat reserves serve as a long-term energy source, allowing camels to survive when food is scarce. When a camel goes a long time without eating, the hump begins to shrink and droop because the fat is being metabolized. It's energy, not hydration. So where does the myth come from? Probably from the camel's ability to survive long periods without water, combined with the visual prominence of the hump. People assumed the two were connected, but the camel's real water-saving abilities come from its physiology. Camels can drink up to 40 gallons of water in a single session and store it throughout their bloodstream and tissues, not in their hump. Their red blood cells are oval-shaped, allowing them to flow more efficiently during dehydration and swell without rupturing when the camel rehydrates quickly. They also produce very concentrated urine and dry feces, minimizing water loss. Their noses are lined with structures that trap moisture from exhaled air, recycling it back into the body. These adaptations allow camels to go up to 2 weeks without water, but the hump plays no role in that system. It's fat, plain, and simple. The myth likely endured because it's so visually satisfying. A hump looks like a container. It's easy to believe, but nature rarely makes things that neat. The truth is more complex, more fascinating, and more accurate. Camels survive the desert not with a tank on their back, but with a suite of finely tuned biological systems that manage heat, conserve moisture, and regulate metabolism. When the hump shrinks, it's not because they're out of water, it's because they're burning fat. The real magic isn't storage, it's adaptation. Milk produces mucus. That's a belief shared by many people, especially when dealing with colds, allergies, or respiratory issues. Parents often avoid giving children dairy during illness, fearing it will make congestion worse. The idea seems intuitive. Milk feels thick and creamy, and it's easy to imagine it coating the throat or lungs, but the science doesn't support this belief. Multiple studies have looked for a connection between dairy consumption and increased mucus production, and none have found consistent evidence. In one controlled experiment, participants were given either cow's milk or a soy-based placebo. Neither group showed significant differences in mucus levels, congestion, or respiratory symptoms. The participants who believed milk made them feel worse tended to report more symptoms, even when they hadn't consumed any dairy at all. That points to perception, not biology. The myth may persist because milk can leave a temporary coating on the inside of the mouth and throat. This creates a slight change in texture or sensation, which some interpret as increased phlegm, but it's not actual mucus. It's just the natural fat content in the milk mixing with saliva. It doesn't affect your lungs or nasal passages, and it doesn't signal an immune response. Real mucus production is controlled by your body's response to irritation, infection, or allergens, not by what you drink. The respiratory system is separated from the digestive tract. Milk goes to your stomach, not your sinuses. In people with lactose intolerance, dairy can cause gastrointestinal issues like bloating or cramping, but that's unrelated to mucus. And for people with dairy allergies, there can be more serious immune responses, but again, those don't involve respiratory mucus. The idea that milk thickens secretions or feeds bacteria is a misinterpretation. Your body produces mucus as a defense mechanism, and its volume is determined by inflammation, infection, and hydration, not by dairy fat. The myth survives because it feels true. People notice a sensation and match it to their beliefs, but feeling thick saliva is not the same as producing more mucus. In fact, milk can be soothing to a sore throat, and it provides calories, protein, and hydration, things that are often helpful during illness. The truth is, unless you have a specific allergy or intolerance, milk doesn't make you more congested. It doesn't trigger mucus. It just feels like it might, and that feeling can be deceiving. Cold weather causes colds. That's a belief almost everyone has heard, especially from childhood. Don't go outside with wet hair, bundle up or you'll catch something, stay indoors when it's chilly. The idea that being cold leads directly to getting sick seems obvious, but it's not true. Cold weather doesn't cause colds, viruses do. The most common culprits are rhinoviruses and coronaviruses, which spread through airborne droplets and physical contact. You get sick by coming into contact with the virus, not by exposure to low temperatures. So why does cold season seem to bring more illness? There are a few reasons. First, people spend more time indoors during cold weather, especially in poorly ventilated spaces. That increases the chance of viral transmission from person to person. Schools, offices, and public transport become prime environments for spreading germs. Second, low humidity levels during winter can dry out the mucous membranes in your nose and throat, making it easier for viruses to enter and take hold. Dry air also helps viruses stay airborne longer, increasing the likelihood of inhaling them. Third, cold air may slightly suppress the immune response in your respiratory tract, making it marginally easier for viruses to establish infection. But these are indirect effects. The cold itself doesn't carry the virus, it just creates conditions where it spreads more easily. The myth likely stuck around because of timing. People get sick more often in colder months, so they associate the temperature with the illness. But correlation isn't causation. Cold weather is the setting, not the source. In tropical climates, cold viruses still circulate, just not in the same seasonal pattern. People can catch a cold during summer if they come into contact with the virus. And going outside in the winter won't make you sick unless you're exposed to someone who's already infected. That doesn't mean staying warm is useless. Hypothermia and frostbite are real risks in extreme cold, and being cold for long periods can exhaust the body. But for everyday colds, the virus is what matters. The truth is, getting chilled might make you uncomfortable, but it won't give you a cold. Only another person or something they've touched can do that. Antibiotics kill all germs. That's a belief many people hold when they think about sickness and recovery. You get sick, you take antibiotics, and they wipe out whatever's causing the problem. It sounds clean, powerful, and complete, but it's not accurate. Antibiotics don't kill all germs. They only work against bacteria, not viruses, fungi, or parasites. And even among bacteria, they don't always kill. Some antibiotics are bactericidal, meaning they destroy bacteria directly. Others are bacteriostatic, meaning they stop bacteria from multiplying, giving your immune system a chance to clear the infection. But none of them target all microbes equally. The human body contains trillions of bacteria, many of which are essential for digestion, immune regulation, and overall health. Antibiotics don't distinguish between good and bad. When you take them, they affect your gut flora, your skin microbiome, and other bacterial ecosystems. That's why people sometimes develop digestive issues or yeast infections after antibiotic use. It's collateral damage. The myth likely persists because antibiotics feel powerful. They come with prescriptions, strict schedules, and rapid relief, at least when used correctly. But they're not magic bullets. They don't kill viruses like those that cause colds, flu, or COVID-19. And using antibiotics for viral infections doesn't help. It increases the risk of antibiotic resistance. That's when bacteria evolve to survive even the strongest treatments, making future infections harder to treat. Overprescribing antibiotics is one of the biggest public health concerns in modern medicine. It fuels the rise of superbugs, strains of bacteria that resist multiple drugs. These infections can become life-threatening, especially in hospitals where patients are vulnerable. Proper antibiotic use means taking them only when prescribed, completing the full course, and not saving leftovers just in case. Self-medicating with antibiotics doesn't just fail, it can backfire. The truth is, antibiotics are precise tools. They work on specific bacteria in specific ways. They don't kill all germs, they don't cure everything. They don't make your body invincible. And the more we misuse them, the less effective they become. Understanding what they do and what they don't helps preserve their power for when they're truly needed. Lightning never strikes the same place twice. It's one of the most quoted lines about nature, used both literally and metaphorically to suggest that rare events don't repeat. It sounds reasonable. Lightning is unpredictable, chaotic, and always looking for the path of least resistance. So once it hits a spot, that area should be safe. But this statement is completely false. Lightning not only can strike the same place twice, it often does, especially if that place is tall, isolated, or conductive. The Empire State Building, for example, gets struck by lightning about 20 to 25 times every year. It's not a fluke, it's physics. Lightning forms when static electricity builds up in storm clouds and needs to discharge to the ground. It seeks the shortest path with the least resistance, often targeting tall structures, metal objects, or anything that sticks out from the landscape. If the same conditions are present, lightning will strike the same place over and over. Trees, towers, antennas, and skyscrapers are all common repeat targets. The myth likely began because people assumed lightning wouldn't revisit the same danger zone. It gave a sense of safety and closure. Once it's hit, it's done. But nature doesn't follow our logic. In fact, once a place has been struck, it may be even more likely to be hit again. Lightning rods are built on this principle. They attract lightning in order to safely redirect it into the ground. Airports, broadcast towers, and tall buildings have complex systems designed specifically because repeat strikes are expected. Even in nature, lightning often follows existing channels. A tall tree in an open field might get struck during multiple storms. A mountain peak may be hit again and again. This myth survives because it simplifies danger. It makes lightning seem less threatening, less random. But the reality is that lightning is influenced by terrain, weather, and electrical conditions, not by history. Just because a place was hit once doesn't make it immune. It might make it more vulnerable. The truth is, lightning can and does strike the same place twice frequently. And in some places, it's almost guaranteed. Introverts hate people. That's the assumption behind a lot of jokes, memes, and personality labels. It paints introverts as antisocial, cold, or uninterested in others. The image is someone sitting alone in a corner, avoiding eye contact, dreading conversation. But that's a misunderstanding of what introversion actually is. Introverts don't hate people. They process social interaction differently. While extroverts often gain energy from being around others, introverts tend to expend energy during socializing. It doesn't mean they dislike it, it means it's draining. After a long conversation or a crowded event, an introvert may need solitude to recharge. That's not rejection, that's regulation. Introversion is about stimulation. Introverts are more sensitive to external input, noise, light, conversation, activity. Their brains process that input more deeply, which can lead to fatigue more quickly. In contrast, extroverts often seek out that input to feel engaged. The difference isn't about warmth or empathy, it's about thresholds. Introverts can be warm, funny, charismatic, and deeply loyal. They can enjoy deep conversations, meaningful friendships, and group experiences. What they often dislike is small talk, surface-level interactions, or being overwhelmed by too much noise or attention. The myth that introverts hate people comes from observing behavior without understanding the motive. Someone who declines a party invite or prefers a quiet night at home isn't rejecting people, they're managing their energy. The idea likely survives because it's easy to label what we don't understand. Quietness looks like disinterest. Solitude looks like avoidance. But often, introverts simply need space to think and feel at their own pace. Socializing isn't painful, it's just taxing. And when they're rested and supported, introverts can be highly social in ways that are authentic to them. The truth is, introversion isn't about dislike, it's about dynamics. Introverts don't hate people, they just connect differently. Dogs only see in black and white. That's the belief many people grow up with, that a dog's world is like an old film reel, shades of gray with no color. It's an idea repeated in books, movies, and classrooms. It simplifies dog vision into something primitive and basic. But it's wrong. Dogs do see color, just not in the same way humans do. The human eye contains 3 types of color receptors or cones that allow us to perceive red, green, and blue light. Dogs have only 2 types of cones. They can see blue and yellow, but not red or green. This condition is similar to red-green colorblindness in humans. To a dog, a bright red ball might appear as a dull brown or grayish tone, while a yellow tennis ball stands out vividly. They can distinguish between some colors, just not the full spectrum we see. Studies using colored lights and behavior tests have confirmed this. Dogs respond differently to various shades, choosing colors they can see more easily. Their eyes are tuned for contrast and motion more than hue, and while their color range is limited, their vision has other advantages. Dogs have more rods in their retinas than humans do, which gives them superior night vision and motion detection. They also have a wider field of view and are better at spotting moving objects, even in low light. These traits are rooted in their evolutionary history as hunters. Seeing every color wasn't as important as tracking movement or spotting prey at dusk. The myth likely began before we had access to detailed eye studies. Early assumptions about animal vision were based on guesswork, not data, and black and white made for an easy explanation. But we now know better. Dogs live in a world of muted colors, not grayscale. They see blues and yellows vividly, reds and greens dimly, and rely more on motion, smell, and sound to understand their surroundings. Their experience is different but not colorless. The truth is, dogs don't see like us. But they don't see in black and white either. Their world is filtered, not blank. Reading in dim light ruins your eyes. It's a warning almost everyone hears at some point. Parents, teachers, and eye doctors often caution against it, claiming that squinting at a book in low light will damage your vision permanently. It sounds reasonable. Straining your eyes must lead to some kind of breakdown, right? But that's not what the evidence shows. Reading in low light can cause temporary discomfort, but it doesn't cause lasting damage to your eyes. When you read in dim conditions, your pupils dilate to let in more light, and your eye muscles work harder to focus. This extra effort can lead to eye fatigue, headaches, or dryness, but these symptoms go away once you rest your eyes or return to normal lighting. No structural damage occurs. The myth likely originated at a time when little was known about visual strain. When people experienced discomfort while reading by candlelight or gas lamps, it was easy to assume that pain equaled harm. But the eyes are designed to adapt to different lighting environments. They're constantly adjusting, pupils constricting or expanding, muscles shifting to maintain focus. Temporary strain is not the same as permanent injury. Modern research confirms that there's no link between dim lighting and eye disease. Myopia, or nearsightedness, is influenced by genetics and prolonged close-up work, not by how bright the lamp is. In fact, some evidence suggests that children who spend more time outdoors in natural daylight may have a lower risk of developing nearsightedness, but that has more to do with exposure to long-distance visual input than the brightness itself. Reading in poor lighting may make the experience less comfortable and reduce reading speed or comprehension, but it won't reshape your eye. The discomfort is like muscle soreness after a workout. It fades with rest and doesn't indicate permanent damage. That doesn't mean lighting doesn't matter at all. Good lighting makes reading more pleasant, reduces fatigue, and helps maintain concentration. It's practical, not protective. The truth is, reading in dim light won't ruin your eyes. It may make them tired, but that's temporary. The discomfort you feel is real, but the harm you fear is not. The brain is just like a computer. It's a metaphor that shows up everywhere in education, in technology, in casual speech. We talk about downloading memories, processing thoughts, running out of mental bandwidth. The analogy feels helpful. Computers take input, process data, and produce output. So does the brain, but as soon as you look closely, the comparison begins to fall apart. Computers follow clear, fixed instructions. Every line of code tells the system exactly what to do. The brain doesn't work like that. It's messy, adaptive, and full of uncertainty. Two people can receive the same information and respond in completely different ways. That's not how machines operate. Computers store data exactly as it was entered. Your brain reshapes memories every time you recall them. It blends emotions, associations, and imagination into something new. Details fade, shift, and sometimes rewrite themselves. The same memory may feel different each time you revisit it. Computer's hard drive doesn't do that. The brain also processes information in parallel, not sequentially. Millions of neurons fire simultaneously, interacting in unpredictable patterns. There's no central processor, no master file system, just a dynamic, ever-changing network of activity. Emotion plays a critical role too. Your thoughts are shaped by fear, hope, fatigue, hormones, and social context. A machine doesn't feel hesitation or excitement. It doesn't get bored or inspired. But those states dramatically affect how humans think, decide, and learn. Damage to emotional regions of the brain doesn't make us more logical, it often makes decision-making worse. Emotions aren't noise in the system. They're part of the operating system. Even the structure is different. Computers separate hardware and software. The brain does. There's no clear distinction between what we think and what we are. The brain changes physically based on experience, a process called neuroplasticity. Learning rewires the brain. You're not just running programs, you're reshaping the machine. The metaphor persists because it simplifies a complex system. It gives us a way to talk about thinking in technological terms, but simplification is not accuracy. Your brain is not a computer, it's not digital, it's not logical. It's a living, emotional, biological organ that builds itself over time. It's more like a forest than a motherboard, and no two are wired the same. Ice cream soothes sore throats. That's something people often say when they're sick, especially children. The cold feels good, the texture is gentle, and the sweetness provides comfort. It seems like the perfect home remedy, tasty and effective. But ice cream doesn't actually treat the cause of a sore throat. It might temporarily reduce pain by numbing the tissue, but it doesn't reduce inflammation, fight infection, or speed healing. A sore throat is usually caused by viral or bacterial infection, or by irritation from dry air, allergies, or overuse. In each case, what's needed is rest, hydration, and sometimes medication, not dairy and sugar. The myth persists because ice cream offers short-term relief. Cold temperatures can numb nerve endings in the throat, reducing the sensation of pain. This effect is real, but it's also brief. Once the cold melts and the temperature returns to normal, the discomfort often returns. And depending on the ingredients, ice cream may even worsen symptoms in some cases. Dairy products can thicken saliva, creating a sensation of more mucus in the throat. That doesn't mean ice cream causes more mucus, but it can feel that way. For people with sensitive stomachs, high sugar and fat content can also irritate digestion during illness. That said, not everyone reacts the same way. For some people, a small amount of ice cream can provide emotional comfort and help encourage eating when appetite is low. But that's psychological, not medicinal. Nutritionally, ice cream is high in sugar and fat and doesn't contain anti-inflammatory or immune-boosting properties. In fact, sugar can slightly suppress immune function if consumed in excess during an active infection. Healthier alternatives like cold smoothies, popsicles made from fruit, or chilled herbal teas can provide similar numbing effects without the downsides. The myth likely endures because it blends pleasure with temporary relief. It feels like kindness during discomfort, but soothing and healing are not the same. The truth is, ice cream might make your throat feel better for a few minutes, but it doesn't solve the problem. It's comfort food, not medicine. You only fall in love once. It's a romantic idea, repeated in stories, songs, and movies. The notion that there's one great love in every lifetime, that once it happens, nothing else compares. It's poetic, dramatic, and emotionally powerful. But it's not supported by psychology, biology, or real-world human behavior. People are capable of falling in love more than once, often in different ways with different people and at different stages of life. Love is not a single-use experience. It's a complex emotional state shaped by context, personality, timing, and neurochemistry. Our brains release chemicals like dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin when we form strong attachments. Those chemicals don't run out after one person. The capacity for emotional bonding is part of human survival. Falling in love is part biology, part story, and the story can be written more than once. The myth likely persists because it's emotionally satisfying. Thinking there's only one soulmate makes the connection feel rare and sacred. It gives love a sense of destiny, a purpose beyond choice. And in cultures that idealize lifelong monogamy, the idea of the one fits neatly into social expectations. But research shows that most people fall in love multiple times throughout life. After breakups, divorce, loss, or changes in circumstance, people often find themselves forming deep emotional bonds again. Those relationships may feel different, stronger, gentler, more mature, or more intense, but they are no less real. Each love is shaped by who we are at the time, and we change. The first person you loved at 16 is not the same as the one you might love at 35. That doesn't make either experience less valid. It just shows that love is adaptive. It grows, fades, returns, and transforms. Believing you only get one shot can create pressure, fear, and unnecessary loss. It can make people stay in toxic relationships or give up after heartbreak. But love isn't a lottery, it's a process. It's not limited to one name or one chapter. The truth is, you can fall in love again and again, each time differently, but each time fully. Sitting too close to the TV ruins your eyes. That's a warning many kids grew up hearing, often shouted from across the living room. The belief is that proximity to a screen somehow strains or damages vision permanently. It sounds logical, close-up light and detail must wear the eyes out. But this claim isn't backed by science. Sitting close to a television or screen won't damage your eyes. It might cause temporary discomfort like eye strain or headaches, especially if you're staring at a screen for hours without blinking or taking breaks. But it won't reshape your eyes or impair your vision long-term. Eye strain happens when you focus on something up close for too long without variation. The muscles that help your eyes focus get fatigued, just like holding your arm in one position for an hour. But once you rest, the strain disappears. That's why optometrists recommend the 20-20-20 rule. Every 20 minutes, look at something 20 feet away for 20 seconds. It resets the system. In fact, children often sit closer to screens simply because they see better up close and prefer larger images. Their eyes aren't being harmed, just responding to comfort. Some early televisions did emit low levels of radiation or flicker in ways that caused eye discomfort, especially before the 1980s. But today's flat screens and digital displays don't have those risks. Modern TVs are much safer, and sitting close is more about personal space than optical health. The myth likely stuck around as a convenient way for parents to regulate behavior. It helped discourage kids from dominating the TV or hogging the best spot in the room. Over time, the behavioral rule became medical-sounding advice. But repeated studies have shown that screen distance isn't a factor in long-term eye health. What does affect eye development, especially in children, is a lack of outdoor time and excessive near work, like reading or using tablets for long periods. That's where concerns about myopia come in. But again, the issue isn't screen distance, it's overall visual habits and environmental balance. The truth is, sitting close to the TV won't ruin your eyes. It might make them tired. It might annoy someone behind you, but it won't cause permanent damage. Handwriting reveals personality. That's a claim many people find fascinating. The slant of your letters, the size of your loops, the way you dot your I's, all supposedly offer clues about who you are. Graphology, the study of handwriting as a personality indicator, has been around for centuries. It promises insight, prediction, even diagnosis. But modern psychology doesn't support it. Studies have repeatedly found that handwriting analysis is not a reliable way to assess personality traits. While certain aspects of handwriting can reveal physical or neurological conditions, like tremors in Parkinson's or irregular spacing in dyslexia, it doesn't reflect personality in a consistent or measurable way. Traits like extroversion, agreeableness, or impulsivity don't correlate meaningfully with how you write. The appeal of graphology comes from its specificity. It gives the illusion of insight based on visible, individual patterns. It feels like a code you can crack. And like horoscopes, it often works through generalization. When people hear personality descriptions based on their handwriting, they tend to accept what fits and ignore what doesn't. That's called the Barnum effect. The idea persists because it's compelling. People want tools to understand themselves and others, and handwriting is personal, unique, and expressive, so it feels like a logical place to look. But correlation is not causation. A hurried signature may suggest someone's in a rush, not that they're aggressive. Big letters might reflect poor fine motor control, not confidence. Context matters. Mood, fatigue, writing tools, and environment all influence how someone writes, and most importantly, handwriting can change. Over time, or even from one day to the next, people vary their style. That inconsistency alone challenges the idea that handwriting reveals stable personality traits. Some employers once used graphology in hiring decisions. Some courts even considered it in testimony. But today, it's classified as a pseudoscience. That doesn't mean your handwriting isn't interesting or beautiful or full of history. It just means it doesn't say much about your character. The truth is, who you are lives in your choices, not your cursive. Looking far away improves eyesight. It's a piece of advice often given to people who spend a lot of time reading, using phones, or staring at screens. The idea is that gazing into the distance somehow resets or strengthens the eyes, potentially reversing nearsightedness or preventing vision problems. It sounds like a simple, natural fix for modern visual habits, but it doesn't actually improve eyesight in the way most people think. Looking far away doesn't correct vision. If you're nearsighted, meaning distant objects appear blurry, staring at those objects won't make them clearer over time. Nearsightedness is typically caused by the shape of the eye itself. If the eyeball is too long, light focuses in front of the retina instead of directly on it. That's a structural issue, not a focus problem. Looking far away doesn't reshape the eye. However, that doesn't mean the advice is useless. Looking at distant objects does help relax the eye muscles, especially after extended close-up work. When you read or look at a screen, the ciliary muscles in your eyes contract to maintain near focus. Holding that tension for too long can cause eye strain, dryness, and discomfort. Shifting your gaze to a distant point allows those muscles to relax, reducing fatigue. This is the basis of the 20-20-20 rule. Every 20 minutes, look at something 20 feet away for 20 seconds. It doesn't improve vision permanently, but it helps prevent temporary strain. The myth that distance viewing improves eyesight probably began with this concept of muscle relief and morphed into a belief about long-term correction. Some people confuse reduced eye strain with improved sharpness. Others think that forcing the eyes to try harder will build strength, like lifting weights. But the eye doesn't work like a bicep. Vision is not improved through exertion. What can affect visual development, especially in children, is time spent outdoors. Studies have shown that kids who play outside regularly are less likely to develop myopia. The exact reason isn't fully understood. It may be exposure to natural light, wider visual ranges, or increased focus variation, but it's not just about looking far. It's about visual diversity. The truth is, looking far away helps rest your eyes, not fix them. It's a good habit, especially during screen-heavy days. But it's not a cure for blurry vision. Exercise turns fat into muscle. That's a common phrase used in gyms, fitness blogs, and casual conversation. People say it to describe physical transformation, to explain how working out reduces body fat and improves muscle tone. It creates the image of one substance morphing into another, but fat doesn't turn into muscle. They're two entirely different tissues with separate functions, structures, and origins. Fat cells store energy. Muscle cells contract to produce movement. One doesn't become the other. What actually happens during exercise is more complex and more accurate than the myth suggests. When you exercise, especially with strength training, your muscle fibers experience microscopic damage. Your body repairs this damage by building stronger and thicker muscle fibers, a process called hypertrophy. At the same time, if you're burning more calories than you consume, your body begins to break down stored fat for energy. This reduces fat mass. So yes, you lose fat and gain muscle, but those are parallel processes, not a transformation of one into the other. The myth probably sticks because it feels visually accurate. Someone gets leaner and more defined, and it looks like their fat became muscle. But that's a combination of fat loss, revealing the muscle underneath, and new muscle development. It's also worth noting that fat loss and muscle gain don't always happen at the same rate. It's possible to lose fat while gaining very little muscle, or to build muscle while retaining fat. The body doesn't shift all energy from one tissue into another like a recycling plant, and sometimes when people stop exercising, they feel like their muscle turned back into fat. But again, that's not how it works. Muscle mass can shrink from disuse. Fat can accumulate from excess calories. The two processes happen independently. They don't convert. The truth is, building muscle and burning fat are different goals that often overlap. Exercise supports both, but the underlying biology keeps their functions separate. If your goal is to change body composition, you need both resistance training and nutritional awareness. Saying fat turns into muscle sounds easy, but understanding how they really work gives you more control over your progress. Breathing cold air makes you sick. That's a warning people repeat when the weather changes. Cover your mouth, stay indoors, don't breathe the cold night air. The assumption is that inhaling cold air allows germs in, lowers immunity, and directly causes illness. But cold air doesn't cause sickness. Viruses do. You can't catch a cold from temperature alone. What you can do is experience irritation or discomfort. Cold air can dry out the nasal passages and throat, making them feel scratchy or raw. It can trigger coughing, especially in people with asthma or respiratory sensitivity, but that's not infection, it's irritation. The myth likely survives because people often get sick during cold weather. But again, that's about timing and environment, not temperature itself. In colder months, people spend more time indoors in close proximity, which increases the chance of virus transmission. Ventilation tends to be poor, windows stay closed, and shared surfaces are touched more often. That creates ideal conditions for germs to spread. Cold weather can also affect how viruses behave. Some viruses, like the flu, survive longer in dry, cold air. This makes transmission more efficient, especially in crowded indoor settings. But breathing outdoor air, even if it's cold, doesn't infect you. In fact, spending time outside can help reduce risk, since fresh air disperses viral particles more quickly than stale indoor air. That's why outdoor gatherings are generally safer than indoor ones during flu season. Cold air may feel uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous by itself. The idea that breathing it makes you sick likely comes from the overlap between exposure and illness. People remember walking outside on a cold morning and getting sick a day later, but that's correlation, not cause. The virus was already present, it just happened to show symptoms then. The truth is, breathing cold air won't make you sick. It might make your nose run, it might sting your lungs, but unless you're exposed to a virus, it won't give you the flu or a cold. Illness comes from microbes, not temperature. Satellites float because there's no gravity. That's a common explanation people use when trying to describe how things stay in space. It sounds intuitive. Outer space is often imagined as a zero-gravity zone, a place where things just drift freely. So if satellites float, it must be because gravity is gone. But this isn't how physics works. Satellites don't float because there's no gravity, they float because they're falling. Gravity is still present in space. In fact, that's the very force that keeps satellites in orbit. Earth's gravity extends far beyond the surface, pulling on everything with mass, including satellites hundreds or even thousands of kilometers above the planet. What keeps satellites in orbit is their speed. They're moving forward so fast that as they fall toward Earth due to gravity, the planet curves away beneath them. Imagine throwing a ball forward, it falls. Throw it faster, it goes farther before it hits the ground. Now imagine throwing it so fast that by the time it would hit the ground has curved away. That's what an orbit is, continuous freefall around a planet. This balance between gravity pulling inward and velocity pushing forward is what keeps satellites from crashing or drifting away. It's the same principle that governs the moon's orbit. The misconception about zero gravity likely comes from the experience of weightlessness in orbit. Astronauts appear to float, objects drift, and there's no sensation of weight, but they're not in a gravity-free environment. They're in a state of freefall, constantly pulled by Earth's gravity but without resistance. Because the spacecraft and everything in it are falling at the same rate, it creates the illusion of weightlessness. This state is called microgravity, not zero gravity. It's not the absence of force, it's the balance of forces. The myth probably persists because we associate floating with the absence of pull. But floating in space is not a lack of gravity, it's a demonstration of it. Without gravity, satellites wouldn't orbit, they'd drift away. The truth is, satellites float because they are in a delicate dance with gravity, moving fast enough to never touch the ground, but never far enough to escape the Earth's pull. Touching a frog gives you warts. It's one of those childhood warnings passed down through generations. Frogs have bumpy skin, warts are bumpy, so the connection seems obvious. Don't touch that toad or you'll end up with a spotty hand. But the truth is, frogs and toads don't give humans warts. Warts are caused by viruses, specifically the human papillomavirus or HPV. This virus infects the top layer of skin and causes cells to grow rapidly, forming the familiar rough bumps we call warts. It spreads through direct human contact or contaminated surfaces, not through amphibians. The bumps on a toad's skin are not warts. They're part of the animal's natural texture and sometimes function as glands. Some toads have parotoid glands behind their eyes that secrete chemicals as a defense mechanism, but none of these structures contain or transmit the wart-causing virus. Frogs and toads are not carriers of HPV. The myth likely arose from visual similarity. A toad looks like it's covered in warts, so people assumed it could give them to you. Add a few centuries of superstition and the belief stuck. In some cultures, toads were even associated with witchcraft, curses, and illness. But biology tells a different story. You're more likely to get a wart from shaking someone's hand or using shared gym equipment than from picking up a frog. That doesn't mean touching frogs is entirely without risk. Some species secrete toxins through their skin that can irritate human skin or mucous membranes, especially if you touch your eyes or mouth afterward. But these effects are not warts and they're not viral. The best practice is always to wash your hands after handling any animal, both for your safety and for theirs. Amphibians can absorb chemicals through their skin, so human contact can also harm them. The truth is, warts come from viruses, not frogs. Amphibians might look bumpy, but their skin won't infect you. That old warning is just a myth with a squishy scapegoat. All insects die in winter. That's what many people assume when the buzzing stops and the air goes still. Flies disappear, mosquitoes vanish, and gardens go quiet. It feels like nature takes a break, wiping the insect slate clean. But insects don't all die when it gets cold. Many survive in ways you don't see. Some go dormant, others migrate, some hide in soil, bark, or under leaves. Winter is not the end of insect life, it's a pause, a transformation, or a retreat. Many insects enter a state called diapause, which is similar to hibernation. Their metabolism slows down, they stop growing or reproducing, and they remain still in protected places until conditions improve. Ladybugs, for example, gather in groups under rocks or inside cracks and stay there through the winter. Other insects survive as eggs, larvae, or pupae, waiting for spring to emerge. Mosquitoes can overwinter in egg form, while butterflies like the monarch migrate thousands of kilometers to warmer climates, returning when temperatures rise. Some insects produce natural antifreeze proteins in their bodies, allowing them to survive sub-zero temperatures without freezing solid. These adaptations are incredibly diverse and often species-specific. The belief that all insects die probably comes from the noticeable silence and stillness. Humans mostly see active adult insects, and when those vanish, it feels like they're gone. But they're not, they're just invisible to us. The ecosystem doesn't start from scratch every spring, it picks up where it left off. Insects play critical roles in soil health, pollination, and food chains, and their survival strategies ensure that these roles continue year after year. Some pests do die off in large numbers, especially if temperatures drop suddenly or remain extreme for long periods. But even then, populations usually bounce back quickly because of the survival of eggs or hidden individuals. The truth is, winter doesn't erase insect life, it reshapes it. The buzzing may stop, but the life underneath continues quietly, waiting for warmth. Dreams last less than a second. It's one of those strange claims that sounds like it could be true, mostly because we rarely remember our dreams in full. They feel like flashes, disconnected images, quick scenes, fragments. So it's easy to believe that dreams are nothing more than momentary flickers, but neuroscience tells a very different story. Dreams can last anywhere from a few seconds to over half an hour. Most dreaming occurs during REM sleep, a phase that begins about 90 minutes after you fall asleep and repeats several times throughout the night. Each REM cycle can last between 10 to 60 minutes, and the longer you sleep, the longer your REM periods tend to get. During REM, your brain becomes highly active. Your heart rate speeds up, your breathing becomes irregular, and brain scans show activity patterns similar to when you're awake. This is the stage when vivid, narrative-like dreams occur. And some of those dreams can feel like full movies, with characters, emotion, and even plot structure, not because your mind compresses everything into a second, but because it sustains it over minutes. The myth probably stems from two things: the subjective experience of time in dreams and poor dream recall. Our perception of time while dreaming is warped. Some dreams feel like hours even if they only last a few minutes. Others feel instant even though they unfold over a longer stretch of REM. It's also common to forget most of a dream within minutes of waking. So when we remember only a brief moment, we assume the whole dream must have been brief. But studies using lucid dreamers, people trained to signal researchers from within a dream, have confirmed that actions and thoughts in dreams often unfold in real time. When told to count to 10 or walk a certain distance in a dream, the timing closely matches waking life. This proves that dreams are not rapid snapshots. They're extended mental experiences shaped by memory, emotion, and imagination. The idea that dreams last less than a second is a myth that underestimates the depth of our sleeping mind. Dreams aren't blips. They're sustained inner worlds that we step into each night. Men think about sex every 7 seconds. It's a statement that's been repeated so often, it feels like a scientific truth. You hear it in jokes, in pop culture, even in classroom discussions about gender differences. The claim paints a picture of men as biologically wired to think about sex constantly, almost uncontrollably. But the numbers don't support it. If this were true, that would mean over 500 thoughts about sex every hour, or more than 8,000 every day. That simply doesn't match how human thought or biology works. The origin of the claim is unclear. It doesn't appear in any peer-reviewed scientific study. It likely emerged as a cultural exaggeration, blending gender stereotypes with shock value to make a point about male desire. But modern research gives us a more grounded view. A study conducted at Ohio State University had male and female participants track their thoughts related to food, sleep, and sex throughout the day using click counters. The result: men reported thinking about sex about 19 times per day. Women reported around 10 times. That's a significant difference, but nowhere near the every 7 seconds myth. And even that difference can be influenced by cultural norms, self-awareness, or how participants interpret what thinking about sex actually means. The human brain generates tens of thousands of thoughts each day. They range from mundane to emotional, practical to imaginative. Sex is one of many things people think about, and its frequency depends on age, health, personality, stress, and context. Reducing male psychology to a fixed clock of sexual thought does more harm than good. It turns normal variation into a caricature. It also ignores the many things men think about that have nothing to do with sex, like work, goals, emotions, relationships, or simply what to eat next. The idea persists because it's memorable and plays into a stereotype, but men are not ruled by a sexual stopwatch. The truth is far more complex and the brain far more balanced than the myth allows. Thinking about sex is normal, but not every 7 seconds, not even close. You can't get pregnant during your period. It sounds like a convenient truth, and many people believe it. After all, if menstruation marks the shedding of the uterine lining and the end of an unfertilized cycle, how could pregnancy happen at that point? But biology isn't that simple. While the chances are lower, it's still possible to get pregnant during a period. Sperm can survive in the female reproductive tract for up to 5 days. Have a short cycle or irregular ovulation. Having sex toward the end of your period could allow sperm to linger until ovulation occurs. In such cases, fertilization is entirely possible. Ovulation typically happens around day 14 of a 28-day cycle, but not everyone follows that textbook schedule. Some people ovulate early on day 10, day 8, or even right after bleeding stops. Others have cycles that vary from month to month. That makes timing unpredictable. Additionally, not all vaginal bleeding is a true period. Some people experience breakthrough bleeding or spotting during ovulation, which can be mistaken for a period. If someone thinks they're on their period and has unprotected sex, they could actually be in a fertile window without realizing it. The myth likely persists because the odds are lower. It's true that the beginning of menstruation usually aligns with a time of low fertility, but unlikely isn't the same as impossible. Relying on period timing alone as a form of birth control is risky and can lead to unintended pregnancy. Fertility awareness methods require tracking more than just bleeding. They involve monitoring temperature, cervical mucus, and cycle patterns over time. Even then, they aren't foolproof. The idea that you can't get pregnant during your period oversimplifies a system that's incredibly nuanced. Hormones, sperm lifespan, and cycle variability all play a role. The truth is, while pregnancy during menstruation is less likely, it's not off the table. If pregnancy isn't the goal, protection should be used every time, regardless of the calendar. MSG, or monosodium glutamate, has been at the center of controversy for decades. For many people, it's a chemical villain lurking in Chinese takeout, processed snacks, or instant noodles. Some say it causes headaches, dizziness, chest pain, or what's often called the Chinese restaurant syndrome. You've probably seen menus boasting no MSG as a selling point, as if MSG were a toxic ingredient that responsible cooks should avoid. But despite the fear surrounding it, MSG is far less dangerous than people think. MSG is simply a flavor enhancer made from sodium and glutamate. Glutamate is a naturally occurring amino acid found in many foods you already eat, like tomatoes, mushrooms, cheeses, and even breast milk. In fact, your body produces glutamate every day. MSG gives food that savory, umami flavor that makes dishes richer and more satisfying. So where did the fear come from? It started with a single letter published in 1969 in the New England Journal of Medicine. In the letter, a doctor described symptoms he claimed to experience after eating at a Chinese restaurant, and he suggested MSG might be the cause. It wasn't a study, there was no data, but the idea took off. Media picked it up. People began to associate MSG with discomfort. The term Chinese restaurant syndrome became a catch-all phrase for vague symptoms, and MSG was blamed for nearly anything that followed a meal. But when scientists actually tested MSG, they found no solid evidence that it causes harmful effects in most people. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the World Health Organization, and the European Food Safety Authority have all declared MSG safe. Clinical trials show that only a very small percentage of people may have mild reactions to extremely high doses of MSG taken on an empty stomach, far beyond what anyone would eat in a normal meal. For the rest of us, MSG poses no more risk than the salt you sprinkle on your fries. So why do people still believe it's dangerous? Part of it is cultural bias. MSG became associated with Chinese food during a time when xenophobic attitudes were more socially accepted, and fear of the unfamiliar drove suspicion. The myth spread quickly, fueled by media headlines and personal anecdotes, but not by science. Another reason is that people often misunderstand how the body reacts to food. If you overeat, don't sleep well, or drink alcohol, you might feel tired or uncomfortable after a meal. MSG is an easy scapegoat. But correlation isn't causation. Your headache after eating stir-fry might have more to do with stress or dehydration than the presence of MSG. And ironically, while people panic about MSG, they ignore how much sodium is in regular table salt or processed food. MSG actually contains about 1/3 the amount of sodium as regular salt, and because it enhances flavor so well, you often need less salt overall when MSG is used. That makes it a helpful tool for reducing overall sodium intake. So no, MSG is not a poison, it's not making you sick, and it's not something you need to fear. Unless you're part of the rare group with a specific sensitivity to large, concentrated doses, MSG is just another seasoning, one backed by science, misunderstood by the public, and wrongfully demonized by decades of bad press. You've probably heard someone say it or even felt it yourself. Take a shot of whiskey, and suddenly you feel warm inside. A drink on a cold night seems like a good idea, especially when your fingers are freezing and your breath turns to fog. It's such a common belief that alcohol warms the body that people have brought flasks on ski trips, used brandy in winter folklore, and even given liquor to soldiers in the trenches. But here's the twist: alcohol doesn't actually warm you up. In fact, it does the opposite. The warmth you feel after drinking alcohol is an illusion. When alcohol enters your bloodstream, it causes your blood vessels, especially those near your skin, to dilate. This process is called vasodilation. As your blood vessels expand, warm blood flows closer to the surface of your skin, making you feel flushed and cozy. But that blood isn't staying deep in your core where it needs to be. It's being pulled away from your vital organs and sent toward your skin. That's why your cheeks turn red and your body feels temporarily warm, but it's just a trick. You're actually losing heat. The blood at the surface cools faster when exposed to cold air, and your core body temperature starts to drop. Studies have shown that people who drink in cold environments lose heat more quickly than those who stay sober. Their body temperature drops even if they feel warm. And worse, alcohol can impair your ability to notice the danger. It lowers your natural shivering response, which your body uses to generate heat. It also dulls your perception, so you may not realize how cold you're getting. That's why alcohol is particularly dangerous in cold environments. It increases the risk of hypothermia. But the myth has stuck around because the short-term sensation is so convincing. The flush, the warm skin, the feeling of relaxation, it all reinforces the idea that alcohol is helping. In reality, it's undermining your body's ability to stay warm where it matters. That doesn't mean a drink in the winter is forbidden. But if you're relying on alcohol to keep you warm in cold weather, especially outdoors, you're putting yourself at risk. Dress properly, stay dry, and know that the shot of rum isn't a heater, it's a heat thief in disguise. It's a strange and unsettling thought. Every time you sneeze, your heart skips a beat. Some people even say "bless you" originated from the idea that your heart stops and you're momentarily vulnerable, needing divine protection. Others claim it's like a mini cardiac event each time your nose tickles. The myth has stuck because sneezing feels intense. It's sudden, forceful, and often involuntary. Your whole body tenses, your eyes shut tight, and your chest contracts. Something about that experience makes it easy to believe something dramatic is happening inside, but the truth is more nuanced. When you sneeze, your body does go through a series of quick, complex actions. Your diaphragm contracts, your chest compresses, and pressure builds in your lungs and throat. This spike in pressure affects the vagus nerve, a nerve that runs from your brain to various parts of your body, including your heart. Stimulating the vagus nerve can cause a momentary change in your heart rhythm, like a brief slowing down. But your heart doesn't stop. It doesn't pause or flatline, it keeps beating the entire time. In medical terms, it's called a transient vagal response, not dangerous, not unusual, and not even noticeable in healthy individuals. The reason people feel like something big happened is due to the sheer physical intensity of sneezing. It jolts your system. Your blood pressure briefly shifts. You exhale explosively, but your cardiovascular system handles it just fine. In fact, your heart is far more resilient than this myth suggests. Some people with heart conditions or pacemakers might notice slight rhythm changes when sneezing, coughing, or straining, but even then the effect is minimal. There's no need to fear that a sneeze is putting your heart at risk. As for the bless you tradition, it has historical roots but nothing to do with cardiac arrest. Some say it dates back to plagues when sneezing was seen as an early symptom. Others link it to superstitions about the soul leaving the body. But in modern science, sneezing is just a reflex, not a medical emergency. Your heart may slightly adjust its rhythm for a second, but it never stops. So the next time you sneeze, don't panic, don't worry about your heart. And if someone says bless you, it's just polite habit, not divine CPR. It's one of the most iconic images in nature, a field of sunflowers slowly turning their heads to follow the sun from east to west, basking in the light as the day passes. The idea is romantic, poetic, and has been repeated in textbooks, cartoons, and garden brochures. It even has a name, heliotropism, the tendency of plants to move in response to sunlight. But here's the truth, mature sunflowers do not follow the sun all day. Only young, developing sunflowers exhibit this behavior, and even that movement isn't quite as graceful as it's often portrayed. During the early stages of growth, when the sunflower head is still a bud, it does indeed track the sun. It faces east in the morning, then turns westward as the sun moves across the sky and resets overnight to face east again. This daily motion is driven by the differential growth of the stem. Cells on the shaded side grow slightly faster, pushing the head toward the light. It's not the flower itself that's doing the work, it's the stalk beneath it. This behavior helps the young plant maximize photosynthesis during a critical growth period, but as the sunflower matures and the head becomes heavier, this movement slows down and eventually stops. Fully grown sunflowers settle facing east. That's right, once they reach full bloom, they stop turning. They permanently face the rising sun. Why east? Studies have shown that east-facing sunflowers warm up more quickly in the morning, attracting more pollinators like bees. The warmth and early light exposure help the plant function better. So while young sunflowers move, adult sunflowers simply pose. The myth likely stuck around because a field of east-facing sunflowers still looks like it's following the sun, especially at sunrise. And because it's a visually satisfying idea, we don't question it. But mature sunflowers aren't spinning like radar dishes throughout the day. They're standing still, oriented east, reaping the thermal and biological benefits. So the next time you walk past a sunflower field, remember, it's not dancing with the sun. It's facing the dawn, frozen in position, not following the light, but greeting it every morning in the same direction. You've probably heard the advice, don't exercise too close to bedtime or you'll be too wired to fall asleep. The logic seems straightforward. Exercise gets your heart pumping, raises your body temperature, and floods your system with adrenaline and endorphins. That sounds like the opposite of relaxation, but research tells a different story. Working out before bed doesn't necessarily ruin sleep. In many cases, it may even improve it. Let's break it down. First, yes, it's true that vigorous physical activity temporarily raises your heart rate, core temperature, and alertness. If you finish a hardcore workout and immediately try to fall asleep, your body might not be ready, but this effect is short-lived. Within an hour or two, your body starts to cool down, and the hormonal shifts from exercise begin to reverse. For many people, this recovery period actually promotes better sleep. In fact, studies have shown that evening workouts can help people fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and enjoy deeper sleep cycles. The key is timing and intensity. If you're doing high-intensity interval training 5 minutes before your head hits the pillow, yes, you might struggle. But moderate exercise like yoga, light weightlifting, or even cardio done an hour or two before bed doesn't sabotage sleep, it supports it. Exercise reduces stress hormones like cortisol and increases sleep-promoting chemicals like serotonin. It also helps regulate your circadian rhythm, especially if you're consistent. For shift workers or people with irregular sleep patterns, a regular workout routine, even at night, can help anchor their internal clock. So where did the myth come from? It's partly due to generalizations. For decades, sleep hygiene guides lumped all stimulating activity into the same category: screens, caffeine, arguments, and yes, exercise. But not all stimulation is the same. Physical fatigue is not mental overstimulation. Moving your body doesn't automatically equal restlessness. And for people who don't have time to work out earlier in the day, avoiding nighttime workouts might actually do more harm than good. Better to exercise late than not at all. So no, working out before bed doesn't automatically ruin your sleep. For some, it might. For most, it doesn't. Your body just needs a little time to cool down. If you listen to your own rhythms, time it right, and avoid pushing to the extreme right before lights out, bedtime workouts can be a healthy, sleep-friendly habit, not a sleep thief in disguise. You've probably heard it as a child: don't swallow your gum, or it'll stay in your stomach for 7 years. It sounds ominous, like your body has a secret chamber where rogue pieces of bubble gum go to wait out a silent sentence. It's been repeated by parents, teachers, and older siblings for generations. But here's the reality: swallowing gum does not make it stick in your stomach for 7 years. That's a myth. When you swallow gum, your body treats it just like it would any other indigestible substance. The base of chewing gum is made of synthetic resins and elastomers, which are indeed resistant to digestion. Your stomach can't break it down like it does proteins or fats, but that doesn't mean it stays trapped. Your digestive system is a moving highway. Things that aren't digested are simply passed along. After a piece of gum enters your stomach, it gets pushed through the intestines and eventually exits your body the same way other waste does, usually within a day or two. So where did the 7-year myth come from? It likely started as a scare tactic to keep kids from making a habit of swallowing gum. Because while gum won't sit in your stomach for years, swallowing too much of it, especially in combination with other indigestible materials, can cause problems. There have been rare cases, usually in young children, where large amounts of swallowed gum formed blockages in the digestive tract. But these are extreme exceptions, not the rule. For most people, the occasional swallowed piece of gum is harmless. Your body knows what to do. The myth also plays into our fear of things staying inside us, of being unable to purge what we consume. But your body is built to expel what it can't use. It doesn't hang onto a wad of gum like a bitter memory. It sends it along the digestive assembly line, and out it goes. So no, gum doesn't stick to your insides for 7 years. It doesn't cling to your stomach walls or hide in your gut like a ticking time bomb. It's just another thing your body processes and discards. Swallowing gum isn't ideal, but it's not dangerous. It's not magical, and it's definitely not immortal. People often say that sweating helps you detox. Go to a sauna, do a tough workout, sweat a lot, and you're flushing toxins out of your body. It sounds satisfying, it feels logical. Sweat equals cleansing, but this is one of the most widely misunderstood health myths. The reality is, sweat is mostly water, salt, and trace minerals. Yes, trace amounts of some chemicals or metals might leave through sweat, but it's not how your body detoxifies itself. The main organs responsible for filtering and removing toxins are your liver and kidneys. They handle the actual detoxification processes, processing everything from alcohol to medications to metabolic waste. Sweat glands are not filtration systems. They're for regulating temperature. When you exercise or heat up, your brain signals your sweat glands to cool you down through evaporation, not to clean your blood. Scientific studies have repeatedly shown that the amount of toxins released through sweat is negligible compared to what your liver and kidneys process daily. Even in extreme heat, the body's toxic load is handled almost entirely by internal organs. The detox through sweat myth likely persists because of how we feel after sweating: refreshed, lighter, like we've burned off something bad. But that's a psychological association, not a medical fact. In reality, if you're truly carrying a toxic overload, sweating won't fix it. You need proper hydration, healthy liver and kidney function, and sometimes medical care. In some cases, excessive sweating can even be dangerous, causing dehydration or electrolyte imbalances if not replenished. So while sweating is great for fitness, skin health, and temperature control, it's not a substitute for your body's real detox systems. Sweating out toxins may sound like a shortcut, but it's a myth. Your sweat isn't a cleaning agent, it's your air conditioning. People often use the words introvert and shy interchangeably. If someone keeps to themselves, doesn't talk much at parties, or avoids the spotlight, they're called shy and assumed to be introverted. But that's a misunderstanding of both terms. Introversion is about energy, not fear. An introvert is someone who recharges by being alone, who prefers depth over breadth in conversations, and who feels drained by too much social stimulation. Shyness, on the other hand, is rooted in anxiety, nervousness about judgment or rejection in social situations. You can be shy and extroverted or confident and introverted. They're completely different traits. An introvert may love giving a speech, enjoy a deep one-on-one conversation, or lead a team, then go home and need hours of solitude to recover. A shy person might desperately want to connect socially but hold back due to fear. Scientific studies in personality psychology support this separation. Introversion is part of the big five personality traits, and it reflects where people draw energy from. It's not a fear of people, it's a preference for quieter environments. The myth likely exists because introverted behavior and shyness can look similar from the outside. Someone sitting quietly at lunch might be recharging or simply uninterested, not nervous or scared. And in a culture that often rewards loudness and charisma, introverts can get mislabeled as socially deficient. But they're not avoiding people because they're shy. They're just navigating the world in a way that fits their internal rhythm. So the next time someone prefers to listen instead of talk or skips the party to stay home and read, it doesn't mean they're shy. It means they're managing their energy. Introverts aren't broken extroverts. They're just wired differently. You're sitting quietly and suddenly one of your ears starts ringing. It's high-pitched, brief, and completely unexplained. And someone nearby says, "Oh, that means someone's talking about you." It's a phrase heard around the world, passed down like folklore, but it's not based on any medical or scientific evidence. That ringing in your ear is called tinnitus. And while it's common, especially in older adults, it has absolutely nothing to do with gossip. Tinnitus can be caused by a range of factors: exposure to loud noise, ear infections, age-related hearing loss, changes in blood pressure, or even temporary pressure differences in the inner ear. It can be brief and harmless or chronic and disruptive. The idea that it means someone is talking about you is a classic example of a superstition trying to explain a natural phenomenon. It gives a random body sensation some social meaning. It feels personal, even mystical, but there's no causal link. Tinnitus doesn't correlate with timing, location, or people's conversations. It's just how your brain responds to changes or disruptions in the auditory system. Some versions of the myth go further, saying that if your right ear rings, someone is praising you, and if your left ear rings, someone is criticizing you. Again, there's no logic or data behind that, just cultural storytelling. In reality, persistent or intense ringing should be evaluated medically, especially if it affects your hearing or concentration. It could signal hearing damage or circulatory issues. The truth is, our bodies sometimes make random noises, and we don't like randomness, so we turn it into a story. But ringing ears aren't a signal from the universe or whispers behind your back. They're just ears doing weird things. Many people take pride in multitasking, answering emails while on a call, cooking dinner while watching a video, replying to messages while writing a report. It feels efficient, like you're doing more in less time. But the science says otherwise. The idea that multitasking boosts productivity is a myth. The human brain isn't wired to handle multiple complex tasks at once. What it's actually doing is task switching. Each time you jump from one thing to another, your brain pauses, reorients, and resumes. These transitions aren't seamless. They come with cognitive costs, time, energy, and focus. Studies have shown that switching between tasks can reduce efficiency by up to 40%. You make more mistakes, take longer to complete each task, and retain less information. It feels like productivity, but it's really performance loss disguised as busyness. And the more complex the task, the greater the toll. Listening to music while folding laundry might be fine, but writing an email during a meeting. That split focus leads to shallow attention in both places. There's even evidence that habitual multitaskers become worse at filtering out distractions over time. The brain gets used to jumping, so it struggles to stay still. Deep work, focused, uninterrupted concentration has been shown to be far more effective for completing important tasks. The myth likely persists because multitasking feels good. It gives a dopamine rush, the illusion of progress, and a sense of control. But like junk food, it delivers short-term satisfaction and long-term decline. True productivity comes from managing focus, not scattering it. So if you really want to do more in less time, do one thing at a time. Multitasking isn't a skill, it's a cognitive illusion. Probably heard it before, even Einstein failed math. It's a comforting idea, especially when you're struggling with a tough problem. If the greatest physicist of all time once flunked math, maybe you're not doing so bad. But here's the truth: Einstein didn't fail math. Not in school, not in university, not ever. In fact, he was exceptionally gifted at mathematics from a young age. By the time he was 12, he was mastering algebra and calculus. The myth likely started from a misunderstanding. In an old biography, someone misinterpreted the grading scale used in Swiss schools. A low number actually meant a high grade, but it was mistaken as a failing mark. Einstein himself once addressed the myth, saying, "I never failed in mathematics. Before I was 15, I had mastered differential and integral calculus." His real academic struggles were with rigid school systems and authoritarian teaching methods, not the subject matter. He questioned authority, disliked rote learning, and clashed with teachers who didn't appreciate his curiosity. But when it came to numbers, logic, and abstract thinking, he was ahead of his time. This myth survives because it's inspiring. It tells people that even geniuses stumble, that success can come from failure. But twisting facts for comfort doesn't help. Einstein's story is actually more empowering when told truthfully. He succeeded not because he was average and overcame failure, but because he had a deep passion for learning, and he pursued it relentlessly. The lesson isn't that failing math is fine, it's that the path to brilliance isn't always straight, and curiosity matters more than perfect obedience. Parents have been telling kids for generations that drinking coffee will stunt their growth. It's one of those warnings that sticks, like don't swim after eating or your eyes will stick if you cross them too long. But here's the thing, there's no scientific evidence that coffee affects growth. Growth is determined by genetics, nutrition, and hormone levels, especially growth hormone and factors like calcium and protein intake. Caffeine doesn't interfere with those biological systems in any meaningful way. The myth may have started from concerns that caffeine affects calcium absorption, which is important for growing bones. But even that link is weak. Studies show that moderate caffeine intake has minimal impact on calcium levels, and only if the diet is already calcium deficient. In reality, kids who drink coffee and have a balanced diet grow just as much as those who don't. In fact, some cultures introduce children to coffee at a young age with no noticeable effect on height. So why does the myth stick around? Probably because caffeine is a stimulant, and parents are wary of giving kids substances that increase alertness or affect sleep. And that concern is fair. Caffeine can lead to sleep problems, anxiety, or dependency in children if overused. But stunting growth, that's fiction. Coffee isn't a growth blocker, it's a misunderstood beverage. If anything, the real issue is not the coffee, but the sugar and syrups often added to it. So if you're worried about your height, look to your genes and your nutrition, not your mug. The coffee growth myth is just that, a myth. It sounds old-fashioned, but it still echoes through classrooms and dinner tables. The belief that punishment is the best way for kids to learn discipline. Do something wrong, get punished, and the lesson sticks. It feels straightforward. Action meets consequence. But child psychology doesn't support this belief. In fact, research over decades shows that punishment may suppress behavior temporarily, but it rarely teaches the desired one. Kids don't just learn by avoiding pain or fear, they learn by modeling, repetition, feedback, and emotional safety. When a child is punished, especially harshly, their brain doesn't shift into learning mode. It shifts into survival. Stress hormones like cortisol spike. Memory and reasoning take a backseat. The child may freeze, shut down, or lash out. What's remembered is what I should do next time, but how bad that felt. That fear might stop a behavior for now, but it doesn't create understanding or empathy. And when the fear fades, the behavior usually returns. Worse, consistent punishment without guidance can harm self-esteem, build resentment, and normalize aggression. Studies show that children exposed to regular punishment, especially physical or verbal, are more likely to struggle with anxiety, depression, and interpersonal problems later in life. On the other hand, positive discipline, clear boundaries, natural consequences, problem-solving, and emotional coaching builds internal motivation. A child who understands why a behavior is harmful is more likely to change than one who's simply afraid of being caught. And children are constantly learning from adult behavior. If the adult uses punishment to control, the child learns to do the same to others. The myth persists because punishment gives immediate results. It's easy. But real learning takes time, consistency, and emotional investment. Punishment might win the moment, but connection wins the long game. Kids don't learn best through pain. They learn best through safety, understanding, and trust. You've probably heard it in conversation. He's such a Gemini, or you're definitely a Virgo. Astrology has a strong cultural presence. Zodiac signs are everywhere, from apps to memes to dating profiles. They seem to explain personalities in a neat 12-box system. But the idea that everyone born under the same sign behaves the same is a myth. Let's start with the basics. Zodiac signs are based on the position of the sun on your birth date. That's one celestial body in one place among billions. Astrology doesn't account for genetics, upbringing, environment, trauma, culture, or personal choices, all of which have far more influence on personality. When people identify strongly with their sign, it's usually due to the Barnum effect, the tendency to believe vague, general statements are tailored specifically for us. If a horoscope says you're sensitive but strong-willed, you nod and relate. But that same description fits millions of people. Studies that test astrology's predictive power have found no consistent results. When blind tests are conducted, asking people to identify their own chart or match descriptions to signs, they usually fail. Personality psychology uses measurable traits like openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. These traits exist on spectrums and show up in every sign. The idea that only Leos are confident or only Cancers are emotional is a stereotype. It oversimplifies the richness of human behavior. So why do people cling to it? Because it offers identity. It creates categories in a chaotic world. It's a fun conversation starter and it feels like a shortcut to understanding others, but it's not science. People may behave similarly because of shared experiences or beliefs, not because of shared star signs. You are more than your birthday. Personality is not written in the stars, it's shaped by your life. The idea sounds strange at first. How can the organ most associated with pain not feel any? But it's true. The brain itself doesn't have pain receptors. Surgeons can touch, probe, or even operate on the brain while the patient is awake, and the brain won't register pain. That's why in some brain surgeries, patients are kept conscious, so doctors can monitor function as they operate. But here's the twist. While the brain doesn't feel pain, it's surrounded by structures that do. The meninges, blood vessels, scalp, and skull all have pain-sensitive nerves. When you get a headache, it's not your brain hurting, it's those surrounding tissues sending signals. For example, migraines involve changes in blood flow and inflammation in vessels around the brain. Tension headaches come from muscle strain in the neck and scalp, but none of that pain comes from inside the brain tissue itself. This fact has practical consequences. It's one reason why brain tumors can go unnoticed for a long time. They may grow without causing pain, at least until they press on surrounding nerves or structures. The brain's role is to interpret pain, not experience it directly. It receives input from the rest of the body, processes it, and decides how to react. But it remains physically insulated from pain itself. So the myth that the brain feels pain is a misunderstanding of its function. It confuses the processor with the signal. The brain is like a control tower. It hears every alert but doesn't feel the turbulence itself. This also reminds us how complex the nervous system is. Pain is not just a physical signal, it's also emotional, contextual, and deeply tied to how the brain interprets threat. But ironically, the very organ that understands pain is numb to it. The brain feels everything, except itself. Lemon water melts fat. It's a claim that pops up in health blogs, social media posts, and casual wellness advice, as if squeezing a lemon into your morning glass of water will somehow trigger a biological fat-burning switch in your body. It sounds healthy, natural, even magical, no diet, no gym, just citrus. But biology doesn't work that way. The myth persists because it fits our desire for easy fixes. Lemon water feels refreshing and light, and lemons contain vitamin C, so we associate it with health. Add to that the belief that acidic foods somehow burn fat, and you've got a popular idea that sticks, even without scientific support. But here's what actually happens. When you drink lemon water, you're just drinking water with a little citric acid and vitamin C. There's no chemical in lemons that actively targets fat cells. Fat is stored energy. To burn it, your body needs to be in a calorie deficit, using more energy than it takes in. That process is governed by metabolism, hormones, and activity levels, not by what flavor you put in your water. Some people argue that lemon water boosts metabolism, but the effect is negligible. Any increase in calorie burning from a warm drink is temporary and minimal. Others say lemon water helps detox the body, and by extension, fat loss follows. But your liver and kidneys already handle detoxification efficiently. Adding lemon doesn't make them work harder or better. The only way lemon water may indirectly support fat loss is by replacing sugary drinks or encouraging hydration. If you drink lemon water instead of soda, you'll consume fewer calories. If staying hydrated helps you avoid mistaking thirst for hunger, that's helpful too. But these are behavioral effects, not metabolic miracles. Another part of the myth is the idea that drinking something acidic like lemon water changes your body's pH and makes it more fat-burning friendly. This is based on the alkaline diet idea, which has also been debunked. Your body maintains a stable pH regardless of diet, thanks to buffering systems in your blood and organs. What you eat or drink doesn't significantly alter that balance. So where does this belief come from? Mostly anecdote, repetition, and wishful thinking. People see someone slim drinking lemon water and assume causation. Or they feel better when they hydrate and think it's the lemon doing the work. But when you isolate the lemon, there's nothing in it that directly causes fat loss. It's not harmful and it might encourage healthier habits, but it doesn't melt anything. The truth is, lemon water is just water with a hint of flavor. It might support fat loss behaviors, but it's not a shortcut, not a cleanser, and certainly not a fat-burning elixir. You can't wake up a sleepwalker. That's what people say when they see someone wandering around in the middle of the night with their eyes open but their mind asleep. The warning usually comes with urgency. If you wake a sleepwalker, they might panic, have a heart attack, or even fall into a coma. But none of that is true. While waking a sleepwalker can be disorienting, it's not dangerous. The myth likely began because sleepwalking looks eerie and unpredictable. When someone moves around during deep sleep, often with blank expressions or robotic motions, it gives the illusion that their mind is fragile or trapped. Add to that the few cases where sleepwalkers reacted violently or seemed confused when woken, and it turned into a full-blown rule: don't wake them. But medically, there's no evidence that waking a sleepwalker causes harm. It might make them confused, scared, or embarrassed, but it doesn't break their brain or their heart. Sleepwalking or somnambulism happens during the deep stages of non-REM sleep. The brain is partially asleep while the body is partially awake. That mismatch allows for movement without full awareness. The person isn't dreaming or acting out fantasies, their brain is stuck in a strange, in-between state. If you wake a sleepwalker, you're just bringing their brain fully back online. It may take a moment. They might feel groggy or startled, but that's no worse than waking from a nap too suddenly. There's no medical danger. In fact, sometimes waking them is safer than letting them continue. A sleepwalker could fall downstairs, walk into traffic, or even leave the house. Gently guiding them back to bed or softly waking them might prevent real injuries. The key is how you do it. Don't grab or shout. Speak calmly. Use touch gently. Let them reorient slowly. The confusion is temporary. They won't remember most of it anyway. So why does the myth stay alive? Because fear sticks. Because it's easier to say, don't wake them, than to explain the complexity of sleep states. And because sleep itself feels mysterious. But the science is clear. Waking a sleepwalker won't hurt them. Ignoring them might. Cracking your spine damages your back. You hear it when you stretch, twist, or get up from your chair and your back makes a loud pop. Someone nearby says, careful, that'll mess up your spine, as if each crack chips away at your bones or wears out your joints. But that's not how it works. The sound you hear when cracking your back or knuckles or neck isn't bone grinding on bone, it's gas. Specifically, it's nitrogen bubbles in the synovial fluid between your joints. When you stretch or twist, you change the pressure in the joint, and those bubbles rapidly collapse or form. That release makes the popping sound. It's called cavitation, and it's harmless. There's no evidence that spinal cracking causes damage when done gently. Chiropractors and physical therapists even use spinal manipulations as part of treatment, producing similar sounds. The key difference is intent and force. When cracking your own back, you're usually doing it to relieve tension, stretch muscles, or feel looser. If done gently and not repeatedly forced, it's generally safe. Pain is a more important signal than sound. If your back cracks and it hurts, that's worth checking. But if it pops and feels better, that's fine. Chronic or aggressive self-manipulation, especially in the neck, can be risky, not because of the cracking itself, but because of the pressure placed on delicate structures. Repeatedly forcing joints beyond their normal range can strain ligaments or irritate nerves. But casual, occasional back cracking doesn't cause arthritis, disc damage, or spine deterioration. That part of the myth likely evolved from general caution. We associate popping sounds with breakage, like something snapping. Add that to fear of spinal injury, and it's easy to assume any noise from the back is bad. But the spine is strong, designed to move, bend, and flex. As long as the motion is controlled and pain-free, it's usually fine. If you're cracking your back 20 times a day just to feel relief, that may signal tight muscles, poor posture, or stress. But the cracking itself isn't harmful. It's a symptom, not a cause. So while dramatic spinal pops might sound like damage, they're usually just gas doing what gas does: loud, harmless, and temporarily satisfying. Water below 0 degrees C always freezes. That's what you learned in school. 0 degrees Celsius equals freezing. It's on thermometers, weather forecasts, and even science textbooks. But like many simplified truths, this one has cracks. In reality, water can stay liquid below 0 degrees C under the right conditions. It's called supercooling. When water is very pure and undisturbed, no dust, no scratches on the container, no shaking, it can drop well below freezing without forming ice. Why? Because freezing doesn't happen just because of temperature. It also needs a nucleation point, a place where ice crystals can begin to form. Without it, water molecules keep moving slowly in the liquid state, even at -1, -5, or even -10 degrees C. You can try it yourself. Chill a bottle of distilled water in the freezer just right, then open it or bump it slightly. It suddenly freezes right before your eyes. The myth that degrees C means instant freezing comes from the fact that it's the standard freezing point for water under normal atmospheric pressure and ordinary conditions. but normal includes impurities, motion, and surfaces that encourage ice crystal growth. Water in nature, like lakes or puddles, almost always contains particles that help it freeze right at 0 degrees C or even a bit above if there are impurities like salt. But distilled water in a lab or in a sealed bottle can defy that rule. Supercooled rain is another example. It can fall as liquid through a cold atmosphere and freeze instantly when it hits something solid, like your windshield or power lines, causing dangerous ice buildup. So freezing is just about hitting a number. It's about environment, purity, and what's available for crystals to latch onto. And this nuance shows why science isn't about memorizing facts but about understanding systems. Yes, 0 degrees C is a baseline, but water doesn't freeze just because a number says it should. It freezes when conditions line up, not just cold, but cold plus structure. This matters in medicine, where controlled freezing is used in cryopreservation. It matters in meteorology, where freezing rain is forecasted, and it reminds us not to trust simple rules blindly. Temperature is a guide, but matter, like water, is full of surprises when you look closer. Eating before bed makes you fat. It's one of the most common rules in diet culture, the idea that anything you eat after 8 p.m. turns straight into fat, as if your sleeping body forgets how to process calories. Late-night pizza, that's an automatic weight gain sentence. Midnight snack, say goodbye to your diet, but the truth is more nuanced. Weight gain happens when you consistently consume more calories than you burn, regardless of the time of day. Your body doesn't have an internal clock that shuts down metabolism after sunset. Calories at 10 a.m. and calories at 10 p.m. are still calories. What matters is your total daily intake and your activity level. The myth probably began because people noticed a pattern. Those who eat late at night often struggle with weight, but correlation isn't causation. Late-night eating often comes with other factors: mindless snacking, emotional eating, high-calorie comfort food, or sleep disruption. You're not usually reaching for carrots at midnight. You're grabbing chips, sweets, or leftover takeout. That leads to calorie surplus, not just the timing. Also, late-night eaters may skip breakfast or eat erratically, disrupting hunger signals and meal balance. But if your total daily calories are appropriate and your meals are nutritious, eating at night won't automatically cause weight gain. In fact, for some people, shift workers, night owls, or athletes, late meals are essential. Your metabolism doesn't turn off at night. While it does slow during sleep, it still burns calories to fuel breathing, brain activity, cell repair, and more. There's also no evidence that eating before bed turns food into fat more efficiently than eating during the day. What's more important is what you eat and how much, not when. If eating at night helps you control hunger or avoid binging the next day, it might even help with weight management. So should you eat before bed? It depends. If it helps you sleep, balances your meals, or fits your schedule, then it's fine. Just don't treat food like a clock-based villain. Fat doesn't care what time it is, it cares about energy balance. And fear of timing creates stress, not solutions. Picking a scab slows healing. It's a warning most of us heard as kids, repeated like a medical fact. You scrape your knee, a scab forms, and your parents tell you to leave it alone. Touch it and they say you'll make it worse, maybe even get a scar. And there's truth behind the advice, but it's not as straightforward as it sounds. A scab is your body's natural band-aid. It forms when blood clots at the site of an injury and dries into a crust, protecting the wound underneath while new skin forms. In theory, once the job is done, the scab falls off on its own, revealing healed skin. But in practice, healing is more dynamic. If you pick at a scab too early, before the underlying tissue is fully repaired, you can reopen the wound, introduce bacteria, and restart the healing process. That can lead to infection, inflammation, and yes, a greater chance of scarring. So in that sense, picking does slow healing. But the real issue is when and how the scab is removed. If the wound is already healed and the scab is just hanging on loosely, removing it probably won't matter. In fact, some dermatological treatments involve gentle exfoliation or debridement of dead tissue to promote healing. The danger is in premature picking, when the scab still serves a protective function. And because wounds itch as they heal, people often scratch or pick without meaning to. That's where habit and hygiene come in. If your hands are dirty, you risk introducing germs. If you pick compulsively, which some people with anxiety or dermatillomania do, it becomes a behavioral issue, not just a wound care mistake. So the myth simplifies a broader truth. Picking isn't always bad, but early, repeated, or unhygienic picking is. The best course is to let the body do its work. Clean the wound, cover it if needed, resist the urge to touch, and let time handle the rest. Scabs aren't just crust, they're part of your body's repair team. Interrupt them and yes, healing slows, but respect the process and the skin knows what to do. Popping pimples spreads infection. It's a warning whispered in bathrooms and shouted by dermatologists alike. You're told that touching your face will make it worse, that squeezing one pimple can cause more to appear, and that infection will spread across your skin. And while it sounds dramatic, there's solid truth behind it. A pimple is essentially an inflamed hair follicle or pore clogged with oil, dead skin cells, and bacteria. Your body reacts by sending white blood cells to the site, creating pus. When you squeeze a pimple, especially with dirty hands or fingernails, you can rupture the follicle beneath the skin, forcing bacteria and debris deeper into surrounding tissue. That can cause swelling, redness, or even lead to new pimples forming nearby, a phenomenon called acne mechanica or secondary flare-up. Worse, if the pressure pushes infected material into the bloodstream or deeper layers of the skin, it can lead to painful cysts or even scarring. For cystic acne, popping can turn a manageable bump into a long-term skin injury. But here's where the myth gets slightly overstated. Not all pimple popping automatically causes infection. If a pimple is close to the surface, fully developed, and extracted using clean tools under sterile conditions, the damage may be minimal. That's essentially what dermatologists do during extractions. But the average person doesn't use sterile tools. They use fingernails, tissue, or whatever's around. And more often than not, they squeeze before the pimple is ready, forcing the contents in the wrong direction. Plus, frequent picking leads to inflammation and triggers the body's immune response repeatedly in the same spot. That slows healing, darkens pigmentation, and increases scar risk. So yes, the myth has truth. Popping often leads to wider spread, deeper infection, or lasting marks. But it's not guaranteed, it's conditional. If you absolutely must pop, the safest approach is to wait until it forms a clear white head, wash your hands thoroughly, use a sterile tool, and apply antiseptic after. Still, dermatologists recommend letting your body handle it, or using topical treatments to dry it out. What feels like quick relief often brings longer consequences. Popping a pimple may be satisfying in the moment, but skin has its own rhythm, and it heals best when left undisturbed. If it hurts, it means it's working. You hear it in gyms, in recovery programs, even in emotional growth. No pain, no gain. The idea is that discomfort signals progress, that suffering is a sign you're doing something valuable. But pain is not always a trustworthy guide. In fact, pain is your body's way of signaling something might be wrong. It's a warning, not a badge of honor. During physical training, for example, some muscle soreness after a workout can indicate that your muscles are adapting and rebuilding, a process called DOMS, or delayed onset muscle soreness. That's normal and sometimes expected. But sharp pain, joint discomfort, or stabbing sensations are red flags. Continuing through those kinds of pain can lead to serious injuries, torn ligaments, herniated discs, or stress fractures. And yet people push through, thinking they're building strength when they're actually causing damage. The myth doesn't just affect athletes, it creeps into mental health too. People believe that if a therapy session doesn't leave them crying, it's not deep enough, or that healing must feel awful. But growth doesn't always hurt. Sometimes it feels like relief, clarity, or release. Similarly, in skincare, people assume that tingling or burning from a product means it's doing something. In reality, it often means your skin is being irritated or damaged. The belief that pain equals effectiveness leads people to overexfoliate, misuse treatments, or ignore allergic reactions. In the world of wellness, this mindset can turn dangerous. Juice cleanses that leave you dizzy, detox teas that cause cramping, ice baths done without preparation, all sold under the logic that discomfort means cleansing or strengthening, but pain is not a universal indicator of improvement. Sometimes it's necessary, like during surgery recovery or physical therapy, but even then it's closely monitored. There's a difference between challenge and harm, between stretching limits and braking systems. The truth is that real progress often happens in quiet, gradual steps. If something hurts, ask why. Is it expected? Is it tolerable? Is it helping or just proving that you can suffer? Growth can be difficult, yes, but pain in itself is not a metric of success. It's a signal. And smart people learn to listen, not to glorify it. Kids need exercise to be smart. It's a comforting idea. Let them run, jump, and play, and their brains will light up like light bulbs. And there's truth here, but also oversimplification. Physical activity is unquestionably good for kids. It improves cardiovascular health, strengthens muscles and bones, helps regulate mood, and yes, supports brain function. Children who are more physically active tend to have better attention spans, improved memory, and higher academic performance. But here's the nuance. Exercise doesn't make you smart. It doesn't inject intelligence into your bloodstream. What it does is optimize the brain's conditions for learning. Movement increases blood flow to the brain, especially the prefrontal cortex, which is involved in decision-making, attention, and self-control. It also stimulates the release of chemicals like dopamine, norepinephrine, and brain-derived neurotrophic factor, all of which support mood, focus, and neuroplasticity. In that sense, a physically active child is more alert, better regulated, and more emotionally stable, which makes learning easier. But this doesn't mean sedentary kids can't be smart, or that gym class is a replacement for math or reading. Intelligence is multifaceted, shaped by genetics, environment, sleep, nutrition, and stimulation. A child who exercises but lacks intellectual challenges won't automatically become a high achiever. On the flip side, a book-loving child who hates recess isn't doomed to fall behind. The myth also creates pressure. Parents may think their kids need constant physical motion to unlock academic success, when in fact what they need is balance, regular movement, but also rest, attention, curiosity, and emotional safety. In some cases, excessive activity without direction, like chaotic behavior, can even interfere with learning. The key is structured, consistent movement. Walking, dancing, climbing, playing, all great for the developing brain, especially when paired with meaningful cognitive engagement. So yes, exercise helps brains thrive, but it's not a magic switch for intelligence. It's a partner, not a cause. The smartest approach: let kids move, explore, think, and rest without forcing movement as the golden ticket to intellect. The body and brain grow together, but one doesn't replace the other. Adult brains can't change. Once you're past childhood, your mental patterns are locked in, or so the myth says. The belief is that the brain is like concrete, soft when you're young but fixed once it sets. People say it to excuse bad habits, to dismiss learning new skills, or to give up on therapy. But the science tells a different story. Your brain is not a statue. It's more like a garden, and it keeps growing, pruning, and rewiring as long as you're alive. This process is called neuroplasticity, and it doesn't disappear with age. It just changes in intensity. Children have more rapid plasticity because their brains are still forming basic structures. But adults can and do grow new neural connections, especially when they're actively learning, practicing, or changing behavior. Language learning, musical training, therapy, even new social habits, all these reshape the adult brain. Brain scans show structural changes in adults who meditate, who learn new tasks, or who recover from injuries. Stroke patients relearn how to walk or talk because new parts of the brain take over lost functions. That's neuroplasticity in action. Even elderly people who take up puzzles or physical activity show measurable changes in memory and cognitive performance. The myth likely survives because change is hard. Habits become comfortable. Emotional patterns feel permanent. And it's easier to believe "I'm just like this" than to work toward rewiring yourself. But every time you repeat a thought, take a risk, or change a routine, you nudge the brain's wiring in a new direction. It might be slower than in childhood. It might take more effort, but it's possible. Saying the adult brain can't change is like saying an old dog can't learn tricks. It's not true. It's just that the dog needs patience, not impossibility. This myth is dangerous because it discourages growth. It convinces people to settle. It limits education, rehabilitation, and personal evolution. But the truth is empowering. Your brain is plastic, not as soft as a child's, but far from frozen. With effort, attention, and time, you can unlearn, relearn, and build again. The blueprint isn't final, and neither are you. Hiccups mean someone's thinking of you. It's one of those old superstitions passed down in whispers, a cute explanation for an annoying reflex. You're sitting quietly and suddenly, hic, someone must be talking about you. Maybe they miss you. Maybe they're gossiping. It's comforting, even romantic. But scientifically, it's fiction. Hiccups are involuntary spasms of the diaphragm, the dome-shaped muscle that helps you breathe. When it contracts suddenly, the vocal cords snap shut, producing that characteristic hic sound. They can be triggered by eating too fast, swallowing air, drinking carbonated beverages, sudden temperature changes, or even stress. In most cases, hiccups are harmless and go away on their own, but they have nothing to do with thoughts, attention, or remote emotion. The myth exists in multiple cultures, from India to Russia to Japan, each suggesting that hiccups are a sign someone remembers you. It's an example of magical thinking, where we try to link bodily experiences with interpersonal meaning. Humans hate randomness. So when something weird happens, like a hiccup, we search for a cause, and what's more relatable than someone thinking of us? But this doesn't hold up under scrutiny. Hiccups occur in newborns, animals, and people with no social activity. They can be induced in labs using controlled conditions. And while they can be triggered by emotional states like anxiety, they're still rooted in nervous system reflexes, not thought transmission. In rare cases, persistent hiccups can signal serious medical issues, like nerve damage, central nervous system problems, or metabolic disturbances. So brushing off chronic hiccups as a love signal could delay proper care. The idea that hiccups carry a hidden message is poetic, but wrong. It's a fairy tale that replaces biology with sentiment. And while it feels nice, science tells a less magical, more accurate story. Hiccups mean your diaphragm is confused, not your ex is thinking of you. If you want to cure them, hold your breath, drink water, or stimulate your vagus nerve, not your imagination. And remember, not everything needs a deeper meaning. Sometimes a hic is just a hic. Forgetfulness equals early dementia. Misplace your keys, forget a name, or walk into a room with no idea why, and suddenly a quiet panic sets in. Is this how it starts? Is this Alzheimer's? The fear is common, but the conclusion is often wrong. Forgetfulness is a normal part of being human. Everyone forgets. It happens more when you're tired, distracted, overwhelmed, or stressed. Your brain filters what's important and lets go of the rest. Short-term lapses in attention, like forgetting an appointment or losing your phone, don't mean cognitive decline. Dementia, by contrast, is a progressive disorder. It's not about occasional forgetfulness. It's about consistent, worsening memory loss that interferes with daily life. Forgetting where you parked is normal. Forgetting how you got to the store, that's more concerning. The myth persists because we link memory with intelligence and identity, and any glitch feels threatening. Plus, media often dramatizes early dementia as starting with subtle forgetfulness, reinforcing the fear. But age-related memory changes are not the same as disease. As you age, your brain may process slower. You might take longer to recall names or facts, but you can still learn, reason, and adapt. Dementia involves deeper changes in judgment, orientation, communication, and behavior. Doctors diagnose it based on patterns, not isolated moments. And many other factors can mimic memory problems: depression, anxiety, medication side effects, vitamin deficiencies, or sleep disorders. That's why it's important not to self-diagnose based on a bad day. If memory issues are persistent, worsening, and interfere with life, then yes, get evaluated. But one forgetful moment isn't doom, it's human. In fact, forgetting is part of how memory works. Your brain prioritizes, organizes, and trims information constantly. That's not decay, it's efficiency. And obsessing over every lapse can make you more anxious, which ironically worsens memory. So don't treat forgetfulness like a diagnosis. Treat it like a signal to rest, refocus, or adjust. The brain isn't perfect, and that's okay. It forgets, and that doesn't mean it's failing. Going outside with wet hair gives you a cold. It's one of the oldest warnings, often shouted by parents when kids head out after a shower. The idea is simple: cold weather and wet hair combine to make you sick. But here's the thing, it's not the cold that causes a cold, it's a virus. Specifically, rhinoviruses and other respiratory viruses are responsible for what we call the common cold. These spread through airborne droplets, contaminated surfaces, or direct contact with infected people. No virus, no cold, no matter how wet your hair is. The myth probably comes from association. Colds are more common in winter when temperatures are lower and people spend more time indoors in close quarters with less ventilation. That increases exposure to pathogens. Plus, cold, dry air can dry out the mucous membranes in your nose, reducing their ability to trap and fight viruses, making you more vulnerable. But temperature alone doesn't give you an infection. You could walk outside in freezing weather with wet hair and not get sick, as long as you're not exposed to a virus. Multiple studies have tested this. Volunteers exposed to cold temperatures didn't get sick unless they were also exposed to a virus. Still, there's a small grain of indirect truth. If your body is chilled, especially if you're shivering, your immune response might be slightly less efficient in that moment. It's a marginal effect, not a direct cause. The danger isn't wet hair, it's the germs around you. So the next time someone scolds you for going out with damp hair, you can politely point out that cold weather is not contagious, but people are. Staying warm is still good for comfort and overall health, but it won't stop or start a virus on its own. Infections require exposure. Colds come from viruses, not hairstyles. Swimming right after eating is dangerous. You've probably heard the warning: if you jump into a pool after a meal, you'll cramp up and possibly drown. The advice is so common it's taken as fact, echoed by lifeguards, parents, and public signs. But the truth, there's no scientific evidence that swimming after eating is dangerous. This myth likely stems from the idea that digestion diverts blood from your muscles to your stomach. That part is true, blood flow does increase to your digestive system after a meal, but it doesn't shut down circulation elsewhere. You still have more than enough oxygen and blood flow to swim safely. In fact, athletes often perform physical activity after eating, runners, cyclists, swimmers, without collapsing from stomach cramps. Yes, some people might experience mild cramping if they eat a large meal and then engage in vigorous activity. That's true for any exercise, not just swimming. It doesn't mean your muscles will seize up and drag you under. The fear of drowning due to post-meal swimming is greatly exaggerated. Medical reviews and emergency records show no spike in drowning incidents linked to swimming after eating. If it were truly dangerous, we'd see widespread incidents, but we don't. At worst, you might feel sluggish or slightly nauseous if you swim too soon after a big meal. But that's a comfort issue, not a life-threatening one. The myth has lingered because it feels logical. Digestion uses energy, swimming uses muscles, so the two must conflict. But your body is more adaptable than that. You can walk, talk, digest, and move at the same time. If you're comfortable, you're fine. If you feel bloated or tired, take a break. But don't fear the water after lunch, fear the myth itself. It's outdated, overstated, and not grounded in medical fact. The pyramids were built by slaves. It's an image etched deep in popular culture. Endless lines of exhausted workers, whipped and forced to drag massive stones under the hot Egyptian sun. But this version of history doesn't hold up. Archaeological evidence suggests that the builders of the pyramids were not slaves, but rather skilled laborers, and many were well-fed, housed, and respected for their work. Tombs discovered near the pyramids contain the remains of workers buried with honor, alongside bread and beer for the afterlife, not the burial treatment of disposable slaves. Graffiti found inside the pyramids includes jokes, team names, and prideful inscriptions like the Drunkards of Menkora or Friends of Khufu, suggesting camaraderie, not coercion. These workers likely came from across Egypt and participated in national labor efforts. They may have worked in rotating shifts with support from farmers during off-seasons. While the concept of slavery existed in ancient Egypt, it was not the foundation of pyramid construction. Slavery in that context also didn't resemble the brutal systems seen in later centuries. Many so-called slaves were servants, debt laborers, or prisoners of war, but the labor force behind the pyramids seems to have been different, organized, specialized, and centrally managed. The myth of slave labor was popularized in part by early historians like Herodotus and later by Hollywood films, which dramatized and simplified ancient history for emotional effect. But modern archaeology paints a more complex and human picture. These builders were engineers, masons, laborers, and transporters, all part of a massive logistical and architectural undertaking. They built with pride, not chains. Believing the pyramids were built by slaves undermines the incredible ingenuity and organization of ancient Egyptian society. It turns a miracle of planning and mathematics into a grim story of oppression. In reality, the pyramids were national projects, symbols of power and belief, and the people who raised them were likely respected, not enslaved. The myth makes the feat seem cruel. The truth makes it even more impressive. Vikings wore horned helmets. It's one of the most iconic images in pop culture, a fierce Norse warrior charging into battle with horns protruding from his helmet. From Halloween costumes to cartoons and even metal band logos, the horned helmet has become a permanent part of Viking lore. But here's the truth. There's no evidence that real Viking warriors ever wore horned helmets into battle. Archaeologists have unearthed many Viking helmets over the years, and not a single one had horns. The helmets that do survive are simple, practical, and designed for protection, usually rounded or conical in shape, sometimes with nose guards but never with decorative horns. So where did this idea come from? Surprisingly, it has more to do with opera than history. In the 19th century, during the Romantic period, costume designers for Wagner's operas, especially Der Ring des Nibelungen, needed a dramatic look for the Norse gods and warriors. They added horns to the helmets for flair and intimidation. The visual stuck. Artists and illustrators followed suit, and soon the horned Viking was everywhere. But in reality, horns on helmets would have been a terrible idea. They would make helmets heavier, less balanced, and easier to grab in combat. Real Viking warriors needed mobility and defense, not theatricality. In fact, the only horned helmets discovered from ancient times predate the Viking Age by centuries and were likely used for ceremonial purposes, not war. The horned helmet myth is a perfect example of how visual storytelling can override archaeology. It simplifies a culture into a dramatic costume, even if it's not accurate. Vikings were real people, traders, explorers, and fighters, but they weren't fantasy villains with antlers on their heads. Believing they wore horned helmets turns a complex civilization into a cartoon. It's not just wrong, it's reductive. The truth may be less flashy, but it's far more interesting. The Viking Age was filled with shipbuilders, navigators, and craftsmen, not opera props. So if you want to understand the Norse world, lose the horns. They never had them in the first place. Columbus discovered America. It's the version taught in countless classrooms for generations, that in 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue and discovered the New World. But this simplified story erases a much deeper and more accurate history. First, let's be clear, Columbus never set foot on the mainland that is now the United States. His voyages brought him to Caribbean islands, parts of Central America and South America, and even there he wasn't the first. Indigenous peoples had lived in the Americas for tens of thousands of years, with complex societies, trade networks, cities, and cultures. You can't discover a place that millions of people already inhabit. Additionally, Norse explorer Leif Erikson reached parts of North America likely Newfoundland in modern-day Canada, around 500 years before Columbus, around the year 1000. Archaeological sites like Elance Ox Meadows provide solid evidence of this earlier European presence. So why do we credit Columbus? Partly because his voyages marked the beginning of sustained contact between Europe and the Americas, including colonization, exploitation, and conquest. He opened the floodgates for European powers to redraw the world map, but even that legacy is mixed. Columbus's arrival led to massive suffering for indigenous populations through disease, forced labor, and violence. He wasn't just a brave explorer, he was also a governor whose rule was marked by brutality. The myth of Columbus as the sole discoverer simplifies history into a neat narrative with a European hero at the center. It erases the agency and achievements of native peoples and ignores earlier transatlantic encounters. It also ignores the moral complexity of what discovery meant, not adventure, but domination. Recognizing this doesn't erase history, it corrects it. It moves us from myth to reality. Columbus was a navigator who played a pivotal role in global change, but he didn't discover America. He landed in an already inhabited world and helped begin one of the most transformative and devastating periods in history. Understanding that truth means looking past elementary school rhymes and facing the full weight of the past. The Great Wall of China is visible from space. It's a popular factoid repeated in books, trivia games, and documentaries that the Great Wall is the only man-made object visible from space with the naked eye. But it's not true. From low Earth orbit, where the International Space Station orbits, many human structures are visible, including cities, roads, airports, and even ships at sea. But the Great Wall, not so much. Despite its incredible length, stretching over 13,000 miles, the wall is relatively narrow and built from materials that blend into the surrounding landscape. Astronauts have repeatedly reported that it's difficult, or even impossible, to see the Great Wall without help. It's not a giant glowing line. It's a narrow, broken structure made of stone and earth, often the same color as the terrain. In fact, many astronauts have said that it's easier to see airport runways or city grids than the Great Wall. The myth probably became popular because the wall is so famous and so long. It felt poetic to say it was the only thing visible from space, a metaphor for human achievement. But reality doesn't care about poetry. Vision from space depends on contrast, size, lighting, and weather conditions. Some astronauts have taken photos where sections of the wall are barely visible under perfect conditions, but it's not unique or consistently observable. There's nothing special about the wall's visibility compared to other large structures. The idea that it's the only visible human creation from space is especially wrong. You can see cities at night glowing brightly, major highways, and even long bridges. The myth turns a marvel of engineering into a piece of science fiction. And while the wall deserves admiration for its scale, design, and historical impact, its visibility from space is what makes it great. It's not a cosmic billboard. It's a human monument meant to stand against invasion, not to be seen from orbit. So if you want to admire the Great Wall, look at it from the ground. That's where its real story lives. Earth is a perfect sphere. That's what most people picture when they think of the planet, a flawless round ball floating in space, smooth and symmetrical from every angle. But that image is more artistic than scientific. In reality, Earth is not a perfect sphere. It's an oblate sphere, meaning it's slightly flattened at the poles and bulging at the equator. This shape is caused by Earth's rotation. As the planet spins, centrifugal force pushes outward at the equator, causing it to stretch slightly. As a result, the equatorial diameter is about 43 kilometers, 27 miles larger than the pole-to-pole diameter. You wouldn't notice it from space with the naked eye, but it's measurable and significant. The idea of a perfectly round Earth comes from simplified models in classrooms, globes, and diagrams, which are easier to design and understand when rendered as spheres. But satellite measurements, laser altimetry, and gravitational studies confirm the bulge. Not only that, but Earth's surface is far from uniform. Mountains, ocean trenches, continental shifts, and varying densities in the crust all distort the ideal spherical shape. There are also gravitational anomalies, places where Earth's gravity is slightly stronger or weaker due to mass distribution beneath the surface. These deviations are mapped in what's called a geoid, a more accurate, wobbly model of Earth's true shape. While Earth is roughly round and symmetrical in the big picture, it's not geometrically perfect. It's lumpy, dynamic, and uneven. But that imperfection is what makes it alive, with shifting tectonic plates, swirling oceans, and changing atmospheric conditions. Thinking of Earth as a perfect sphere can lead to flawed assumptions in science, navigation, and satellite alignment. Precision matters, and the truth is that our planet, like everything natural, carries the marks of motion, pressure, and age. The myth of a perfectly round Earth isn't harmful, but it oversimplifies a planet that's far more complex and fascinating than a polished ball. The real shape of Earth tells the story of its history, its forces, and its constant movement, a sphere, but not a perfect one. If a baby falls, pick it up immediately. It sounds instinctive. The moment a baby topples, you rush over, scoop them up, and comfort them. But while this reaction is rooted in love and concern, it can sometimes backfire. In many cases, immediately reacting with alarm can actually make things worse, not better. Babies and toddlers are constantly learning how to move through space, how to balance, walk, crawl, and stand. They fall often, and that's part of the process. If a child falls and isn't hurt, they often look around for a cue on how to react. If you gasp, panic, or run over dramatically, they may start crying not because of pain, but because of your emotional signal. You've taught them that something must be wrong. On the other hand, if you stay calm, smile, and offer gentle reassurance without making a scene, they're more likely to brush it off, regain confidence, and try again. Of course, if the fall is serious, if there's a head impact, visible injury, or any sign of distress, immediate attention is critical. But in normal, harmless tumbles, a measured response is more helpful. Pediatricians and child psychologists often recommend letting the child process the event first. Watch them. Are they confused? Are they hurt? Do they look to you for a reaction? Let them take the lead. This teaches resilience and helps them develop a more accurate sense of danger versus surprise. It also encourages independence, allowing them to explore their environment without constant fear of failure. The myth that you must immediately swoop in at every trip or stumble treats every fall as trauma, but not all falls are the same. Some are just part of growing up. Learning to walk includes falling. Learning to balance means tipping over. And learning to recover means sometimes doing so without a dramatic rescue. Children are sensitive to the tone you set. If you teach them that falling is okay, they'll learn to get back up, stronger and less afraid. The lesson isn't to ignore them, it's to know when to comfort and when to encourage. Shaky hands mean vitamin deficiency. If your hands tremble slightly, especially when you're tired or nervous, someone might suggest that you're lacking vitamins, especially B12 or magnesium. While nutrient deficiencies can play a role in tremors, the reality is far more complicated. Hand tremors have many causes and most are not linked to diet. For starters, physiological tremors are normal. Everyone's hands shake slightly when held still. It's usually too subtle to notice. Stress, caffeine, fatigue, or even excitement can make these tremors more visible. That's not a sign of illness, it's just your nervous system responding to stimuli. Essential tremor, a common neurological condition, causes rhythmic shaking, often in the hands, and is usually inherited. It's not related to nutrition at all. Parkinson's disease can also cause hand tremors, but these are typically slower, occur at rest, and come with other symptoms like stiffness and slowness of movement. Then there are medication side effects, from asthma drugs to antidepressants that can trigger shaking. Overactive thyroid, also a culprit. Low blood sugar, same. Now, vitamin deficiencies can contribute, but they're rarely the sole or primary cause. Severe B12 deficiency might cause nerve issues that include tingling or unsteadiness, but not usually isolated hand tremors. Magnesium deficiency can cause muscle twitching, but again, that's different from persistent hand shaking. Diagnosing tremors based on old wives' tales is risky. Self-diagnosing a vitamin problem based on shaky hands could lead to unnecessary supplements or worse, overlooking a real medical issue. If your hands shake and it's persistent, getting a full medical evaluation is better than guessing your diet is the problem. The myth that shaky hands equals vitamin deficiency survives because it sounds easy. Pop a pill, problem solved. But the human nervous system is that simple. It's affected by genetics, environment, stress, metabolism, and more. Vitamins are just one tiny piece of a much larger puzzle, so if you're trembling, don't panic and don't rush to the supplement aisle. You might just need rest, or you might need a doctor, but not necessarily a vitamin. Talent is inborn. It's a comforting idea that some people are just born gifted, destined for greatness in music, art, science, or sports. We look at a child who plays piano effortlessly, a teen who solves math problems without blinking, or a painter who seems to feel colors in their bones, and we say they were born with it. But that myth overlooks a critical truth: that talent is not purely innate. It's not a magic trait hiding in your DNA, waiting to be unlocked. What we call talent is almost always the result of thousands of hours of effort, training, and environment stacked on top of raw potential. Yes, genetics play a role. Some people might have better muscle coordination, faster reflexes, sharper hearing, or a more agile memory, but that's just the starting point. A child with a gift who doesn't practice will be surpassed by a regular kid who works hard. Study after study supports this. Anders Ericsson's research on deliberate practice, The kind of focused, repetitive, goal-oriented training that experts engage in shows that mastery takes time, not magic. Talent might make the learning curve smoother at first, but practice shapes the final outcome. Mozart is a famous example. People say he was composing at age 5. True, but they forget his father was a renowned music teacher who trained him from infancy in a highly musical home, Tiger Woods. Played golf before age 2 with a father who was obsessed with the sport. What looks like talent often starts as obsession, early exposure, and repetition. The myth of inborn talent can also be damaging. It leads people to give up too early. "I wasn't born for this," they say, and it fuels elitism in education and sports where only the naturally talented are supported. It also blinds us to the role of opportunity. Talent needs space, tools, time, and encouragement to grow. Without those, even the most promising ability fades. Believing talent is inborn is like seeing only the tip of the iceberg. The rest, the hours, the failures, the mentors, is hidden underwater. But that's where greatness is actually built. You're not born finished. You're built over time. You can't learn after 50. That's what people say, that once you reach a certain age, your brain slows down, your memory fades, and it's too late to pick up new skills. But this belief is outdated and flat out wrong. The human brain remains capable of learning, adapting, and changing throughout life, a concept known as neuroplasticity. While certain types of learning, like memorizing names or learning new languages, might be faster in youth, adults over 50 can still form new neural connections, absorb complex ideas, and master new tasks. In fact, learning later in life has its advantages. Older adults often have better focus, discipline, and context. They know how to learn, and they can connect new information to decades of experience. Want to learn to play guitar at 55? Go for it. Want to learn coding at 60? Totally possible. Language, music, painting, chess, the door is open no matter your age. Cognitive scientists have shown that the brain adapts when challenged. Learning new things stimulates brain growth, strengthens memory, and even lowers the risk of dementia. In contrast, believing you can't learn past 50 can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you assume your brain is too old, you won't try, and that lack of effort becomes the problem, not your age. Many of the world's most impactful achievements were made by people well past 50. Grandma Moses started painting in her 70s. Harlan Sanders didn't found KFC until his 60s. Age isn't the enemy, stagnation is. Yes, older brains might take a bit longer to absorb new information. That's normal. But they also retain knowledge longer and often understand deeper patterns better. It's not about speed, it's about consistency and purpose. The myth that you stop learning after a certain age is just fear dressed up as fact. The real truth, learning is a lifelong ability. As long as you're curious and willing to try, your brain will meet you halfway. 50 isn't the finish line, it's just another starting point. Hormones control your personality. It's a statement that sounds scientific and has some truth behind it, but it's also a dramatic oversimplification. Hormones absolutely influence behavior. They help regulate mood, energy, appetite, sleep, stress, and sexual drive. But personality, the stable traits that define how we think, feel, and act across time, is not a direct product of hormones. It's a blend of biology, psychology, environment, and experience. Take testosterone, for example. It's linked to aggression, risk-taking, and dominance, but not every person with high testosterone is aggressive. Context matters. Social rules, upbringing, and life experience shape how those biological impulses are expressed. Estrogen and progesterone affect mood, and shifts in these hormones, like during menstruation, pregnancy, or menopause, can influence emotional states. But again, that's mood, not personality. Cranky week doesn't mean your personality has changed. Cortisol, the stress hormone, spikes in response to pressure. That can affect your patience, memory, and focus. But it doesn't rewrite your personality traits like openness, conscientiousness, or extroversion. Long-term personality shifts usually involve deeper factors, trauma, therapy, major life changes, not just hormones fluctuating. The myth that hormones control personality likely comes from how visible their effects can be. Puberty, for instance, brings dramatic mood swings and identity exploration, often blamed on hormones. But what's really happening is a combination of neurological development, social change, and growing independence. Blaming hormones for someone's attitude or decisions is tempting. It removes personal responsibility, but humans are more than hormone machines. We reflect, adapt, and evolve. Your personality is shaped over years by feedback from your environment, by choices you make, and by the people around you. Hormones provide the background music, not the script. So while you can't ignore biology, you also can't reduce a person's identity to chemical messengers. That's not just misleading, it's dehumanizing. The truth is more empowering. You're not at the mercy of your hormones. You're a complex system of body, mind, and experience. And your personality, that's yours to build. If someone doodles, they're not listening. That's the assumption we've all made at some point. The kid drawing in the margins of their notebook during class or the coworker sketching shapes during a meeting must be bored or distracted. But research says otherwise. Doodling is not always a sign of disengagement. In fact, it can actually improve focus and memory. When your brain is understimulated, like during a long lecture or repetitive meeting, it seeks stimulation to stay awake. Doodling provides just enough mental activity to prevent the mind from wandering completely. It acts like a mental anchor, something to keep you tethered to the moment while the rest of your brain listens. One famous study published in the journal Applied Cognitive Psychology found that people who doodled while listening to a boring phone message remembered 29% more information than those who didn't doodle. Why? Because doodling stops your brain from drifting into daydreams or getting lost in unrelated thoughts. It keeps your cognitive system in low-power listening mode, more attentive than it looks. Doodling does mean you're zoning out. It means your brain is balancing stimulation and focus. Of course, this depends on the type of doodling. Drawing complex scenes or obsessing over tiny details might become distracting. But basic, repetitive shapes, circles, spirals, patterns don't demand much cognitive load and allow the brain to keep absorbing spoken words. The myth that doodlers aren't listening comes from visual bias. If someone's eyes aren't locked on the speaker, we assume they're checked out. But the ears are still working. People learn in different ways, and for some, doodling helps process and retain information. Instead of punishing it in schools or meetings, we might benefit from understanding it as a tool. Doodling is a silent survival strategy for attention, not an act of rebellion. So the next time you see someone drawing in the margins, don't assume they're ignoring you. They might be listening more closely than anyone else. All bees die after stinging. It's one of the most commonly repeated facts about bees that once they sting you, it's over for them. And while that's true for one type of bee, it's not true for all bees. The myth specifically applies to the worker honeybee. These bees have barbed stingers that get lodged in the thick, elastic skin of mammals like humans. When a honeybee tries to fly away after stinging, its stinger gets stuck, and the bee literally tears part of its abdomen out, leading to its death. It's a biological suicide defense, effective because it inflicts maximum damage while protecting the hive. But not all bees share this fate. Many other species, like bumblebees and carpenter bees, have smooth stingers. They can sting multiple times without dying. Even some honeybees can sting certain insects or animals with thinner skin and survive. Then there are male bees called drones. They don't even have stingers. So the idea that all bees die after stinging is simply false. Misunderstanding based on one species, the most common and visible one. This myth probably spread because it sounds noble, tragic, and simple. One sting equals one death, but bee biology is more nuanced. The evolutionary reason behind the honeybee's barbed stinger is protection. Since the workers don't reproduce, their role is to defend the hive even at the cost of their own lives. Their sacrifice protects the queen and the colony's future. But again, that's just honeybee workers. Bees as a whole include over 20,000 species, many of which behave very differently. This myth also adds to the fear of bees. People assume a bee sting is a death sentence for the bee, creating tension and panic. But bees rarely sting unless threatened. And understanding their biology helps us respect them more, not just as stingers, but as essential pollinators keeping our food systems alive. So no, not all bees die after stinging. Some do, most don't. And even those that do only sting as a last resort. Women are naturally more emotionally intelligent. It's a belief that sounds flattering. Women are more empathetic, more intuitive, better at reading emotions. But as nice as it sounds, it's still a stereotype. And like most stereotypes, it oversimplifies a complex truth. Emotional intelligence, EQ, refers to the ability to recognize, understand, manage, and respond to emotions, both your own and others. Studies do show that on average, women tend to score higher in certain components of EQ, especially empathy and interpersonal sensitivity. But that doesn't mean they're naturally more emotionally intelligent. Many of those differences are shaped by culture, not biology. From a young age, girls are encouraged to talk about feelings, show compassion, and care for others. Boys, on the other hand, are often told to man up, suppress feelings, and focus on competition. Over time, those messages mold behavior. Girls practice emotional expression more. Boys might develop emotional insight too, but they're not rewarded for showing it. So what looks like natural ability is often practiced skill. When men and women are given the same emotional training, like in leadership workshops or therapy settings, the gender gap shrinks or disappears entirely. EQ is learnable. It's not hardwired. There are also cultural biases in how we measure and perceive EQ. Woman showing concern is seen as emotionally aware. A man doing the same might be labeled soft or weak. That double standard shapes both perception and self-reporting in studies. The myth that women are naturally more emotionally intelligent can hurt both genders. It burdens women with the expectation to always be emotionally available, kind, and understanding, even in toxic situations. It also denies men the chance to grow emotionally without shame. Emotional intelligence isn't a gendered trait. It's a human trait. Anyone can learn to listen better, empathize deeper, and respond more wisely. Gender doesn't define emotional skill, effort does. So instead of saying women are naturally better at EQ, it's more accurate to say they're often trained to be, and with the right support, anyone can catch up. If a cat blinks slowly, it means it loves you. It's one of the most popular cat myths on the internet, passed around with heartwarming certainty. You see your cat sitting across the room, staring at you with relaxed eyes, and then blink, slowly. People say it's a feline "I love you." But is it? The truth is a little more complex. Slow blinking in cats is a sign of trust and calmness. In the animal world, especially among predators, prolonged eye contact can be a threat. Direct, unbroken stare means alertness, challenge, or even aggression. So when a cat slowly blinks, it's essentially showing you that it doesn't see you as a threat. It's saying, "I feel safe around you." In cat behavior science, this is called an affiliative gesture, a nonverbal expression of social bonding. So while slow blinking isn't quite the same as romantic or emotional love the way humans feel it, it is a meaningful sign. It tells you your cat is relaxed, secure, and open to social interaction. More importantly, if you slow blink back, many cats will return the gesture, and this back and forth can build trust over time. Studies have even confirmed this. In one experiment, cats were more likely to approach humans who slow blinked at them than those who didn't. It's a form of nonverbal communication that works within feline social language, but calling it love might be projecting a bit. Cats don't express affection the way dogs do. They're more subtle, more independent. A cat's love shows up in comfort, presence, and routine. Sleeping near you, sitting beside you, grooming you, bringing you gifts, sometimes dead ones. So yes, slow blinking means your cat is at peace with you. It's not exactly "I love you" in the human sense, but in the cat world it's close. It means you're trusted. And for a cat, trust is everything. So next time your cat blinks slowly at you, blink back. It's one of the few ways they're truly talking to you in their own language. Dogs feel guilt. You walk into the room and see a mess. Torn paper, broken items, food gone. You look at your dog and there it is, the guilty face. Tail tucked, ears back, eyes wide. Everyone says he knows what he did. But does he? The truth is, not exactly. Dogs don't feel guilt in the way humans do. That look we interpret as guilt is actually a response to your behavior, not theirs. Studies have shown that when dogs are scolded, they show those guilty expressions whether or not they actually did anything wrong. The body language we see, lowered head, avoiding eye contact, tail between legs, is a form of appeasement. It's how dogs respond to perceived anger or dominance from their owners. In other words, they're reacting to you, not to the mess they made 2 hours ago. Dogs live in the present. They associate consequences with immediate actions. If you catch your dog in the act of chewing a shoe and scold them, they can learn that chewing shoes leads to punishment. But if you come home later and scold them for something that happened earlier, they don't connect the dots. They just see that you're upset and react accordingly. The myth of dog guilt is powerful because of how human their expressions seem. We want to believe they know better, but what we're really seeing is a learned response to human emotions. This doesn't mean dogs don't feel anything. They feel fear, joy, excitement, stress, and attachment. But guilt, as in understanding right from wrong and regretting an action, is likely beyond them. Their emotional range is different. So next time your dog gives you that look, know this: it's not confession, it's submission. They're not saying "I'm sorry," they're saying "please don't be mad." It's not guilt, it's a plea for peace. Understanding this helps you train better, react more fairly, and stop assigning human emotions where they don't fit. Dogs aren't little people in fur. They're dogs, and they're incredible just the way they are. Dilated pupils mean attraction. You've probably heard that if someone's pupils get larger while they're looking at you, it means they're attracted to you. It sounds scientific, almost like a hidden biological signal, and it's partially true, but only in specific contexts. Pupil dilation is a response controlled by the autonomic nervous system. It happens in low light, when the eyes need to take in more visual information. It also happens during moments of heightened emotion, fear, excitement, surprise, or yes, attraction. So when someone is interested in you, especially in an intimate or romantic context, their pupils can dilate. But that's not a guarantee, and it's definitely not exclusive to attraction. Your pupils also dilate when you're solving a hard math problem, watching a scary movie, or just entering a dim room. They contract again in bright light or when you're relaxed. The myth persists because of old studies. In the 1970s, experiments showed that men found women with artificially dilated pupils more attractive. There's even evidence that portrait painters in the Renaissance era used to paint subjects with larger pupils to enhance their beauty. But those studies didn't prove causation. They only showed correlation under specific lighting and emotional circumstances. Plus, trying to read someone's feelings by staring into their pupils is wildly unreliable. People's eyes are affected by light, fatigue, medication, caffeine, and mood, all of which can change pupil size. It's also culturally dependent. In some societies, people maintain strong eye contact. In others, it's considered rude. Interpreting pupil size without context can lead to huge misunderstandings. Yes, attraction can trigger pupil dilation, but so can a million other things. It's not a love detector, it's just one piece of a much larger emotional puzzle. If you're trying to figure out if someone likes you, watch their overall behavior, not just their eyes. Do they lean in when talking to you? Do they smile often? Mirror your gestures? Respond quickly? Pupil size is a fun fact, not a reliable signal. Trust patterns, not pupils. Eating carrots gives you night vision. This myth is so widespread that many people still believe it without question. Parents tell their kids to eat carrots to see better in the dark, cartoons reinforce it, and even video games reference it. But while carrots are healthy, they don't grant you superhero powers in the dark. The origin of this myth is surprisingly clever and rooted in wartime propaganda. During World War II, the British Royal Air Force began using radar technology to detect enemy planes at night. To keep the radar a secret, they launched a public misinformation campaign claiming their pilots had superior night vision because they ate lots of carrots. Newspapers published stories about pilots like John Cunningham, nicknamed Cat's Eyes, who reportedly ate carrots to improve his vision. The public ate it up, literally. Carrot consumption rose dramatically, and the myth stuck. Scientifically, carrots are rich in beta-carotene, which the body converts into vitamin A, a nutrient essential for maintaining healthy vision, particularly in low-light conditions. A deficiency in vitamin A can lead to night blindness. So in that sense, carrots help your night vision if you're deficient. But if you already get enough vitamin A from your diet, eating more carrots won't sharpen your eyes or let you see in total darkness. There's a limit to how much beta-carotene your body can use. Once your vitamin A levels are sufficient, the extra doesn't go to your eyes, it just gets stored or passed through. And eating excessive amounts of carrots can actually turn your skin orange, a harmless condition called carotenemia. So yes, carrots support eye health and vitamin A is essential, but they don't grant special abilities. You won't become a night owl just by munching on them. The myth lives on because it feels logical. Carrots are good for eyes. Eyes are used in the dark. Therefore, carrots help you see in the dark, but that's a leap too far. Healthy vision depends on a balanced diet, proper eye care, and genetics, not one magic vegetable. So eat your carrots, they're good for you, but don't expect to see through walls. Hair loss is caused by stress. That's what most people believe, that if you're losing hair, you must be under too much pressure. And while there's a connection, it's not as direct or universal as the myth suggests. Hair loss is complex. It can be caused by genetics, hormonal changes, illness, medications, autoimmune conditions, nutritional deficiencies, and yes, stress. But not all hair loss is stress-related, and not all stress leads to hair loss. The most common type of hair loss, especially in men, is androgenetic alopecia, also known as male or female pattern baldness. It's mostly driven by genetics and hormones, not emotions. If your parents or grandparents went bald, chances are you will too. That type of hair loss is gradual and permanent, but stress can trigger a different kind of hair loss called telogen effluvium. In this condition, significant stress, such as surgery, trauma, illness, or emotional shock, pushes large numbers of hair follicles into the resting phase. After a few months, the hairs fall out suddenly in large clumps. This form of hair loss is usually temporary and reversible once the stressor is removed. Another condition linked to stress is trichotillomania, a compulsive hair-pulling disorder often tied to anxiety or trauma. And then there's alopecia areata, an autoimmune disease that causes patchy hair loss, which some believe may be exacerbated by stress, though the exact link is still under study. The myth that all hair loss is caused by stress oversimplifies a highly personal and medical issue. It also creates guilt, as if people are somehow to blame for stressing too much. In reality, hair loss is often out of your control and should be diagnosed properly. It's not just about relaxing or meditating more. It might require medical treatment, dietary changes, or hormone regulation. Stress can contribute, but it's rarely the sole cause. So if you're losing hair, don't assume it's just nerves. Talk to a professional. And remember, hair loss is more common than ever, and it doesn't define you. Blame genes, not just stress. Sleeping with your head facing north is bad for you. This myth is especially common in parts of Asia and is rooted in traditional beliefs about energy flow, death, and magnetic fields. Some people claim that aligning your head to the north while you sleep disrupts your circulation, causes nightmares, or drains your life energy. But is there any scientific truth to this? Not really. Let's break it down. The idea partly comes from ancient practices like Vastu Shastra and Feng Shui, which associate direction with balance, harmony, and cosmic energy. In Hindu tradition, the north is the direction of the dead. Bodies are placed with their heads facing north during funeral rites. So sleeping in that orientation is considered inauspicious or spiritually harmful. Then there's the magnetic theory. Some claim that the Earth's magnetic field affects blood circulation and that aligning your head with the North Pole interferes with the iron in your blood, potentially harming your brain. But scientifically, this doesn't hold up. The Earth's magnetic field is incredibly weak, about 100 times weaker than a refrigerator magnet. It has no measurable impact on the iron in your bloodstream, which is bound in molecules and unaffected by such low magnetic forces. There's no evidence that sleeping with your head in any particular direction affects your health. What does affect your sleep is noise, light, temperature, stress, and posture, not compass orientation. That said, belief can influence perception. If you think sleeping north gives you nightmares or anxiety, your brain might respond accordingly. That's the placebo or nocebo effect in action. But that's psychological, not magnetic. The myth persists because of cultural traditions and the human tendency to find patterns. We like to believe that aligning ourselves with the planet improves balance and health. And while that might be spiritually meaningful for some, it's not grounded in biology. So unless your culture or personal beliefs make it important, don't worry about where your head points. Sleep is about quality, not coordinates. North, south, east, or west, what matters most is that you sleep well and feel rested. Itchy palms mean money is coming your way. That's a superstition almost everyone has heard at some point. In some versions, if your right palm itches, you'll receive money. If it's your left, you'll lose money, or vice versa. People scratch their hands and joke about payday, lottery wins, or bad luck, all based on nothing more than a tingling sensation in the skin. But what does science say? The truth is simple. Itchy palms have nothing to do with your finances. They're usually caused by dry skin, allergies, eczema, dermatitis, or even irritation from soaps or fabrics. In some cases, persistent itching can be a sign of a more serious issue like diabetes, liver problems, or nerve disorders, but never money. The origin of the myth goes back centuries. In old European folklore, especially among the Celts and in England, it was believed that rubbing silver coins on itchy hands would relieve the sensation. Over time, this evolved into the idea that the itch itself predicted money. Superstitions love to assign meaning to random physical sensations, especially those that seem spontaneous and hard to explain. Itchy palms are common and easy to notice, which makes them perfect for myth-making. If you scratch your palm and then unexpectedly find money the next day, the brain connects those events, even if they're unrelated. It's classic confirmation bias. We remember the hits and forget the misses. But there's no biological mechanism that ties skin receptors in your hands to incoming or outgoing cash. The nerves in your palm can't detect financial shifts, and if they could, bankers would never wear gloves. Still, people enjoy the fun of the myth. It turns a small annoyance into a hopeful sign. In uncertain times, even silly beliefs can offer comfort or humor, but it's important to separate playfulness from reality. If your palms itch, reach for lotion, not a lottery ticket. Financial success comes from effort, strategy, and sometimes luck, but not skin symptoms. Money doesn't come from your nerves, it comes from your actions. Bad teeth are genetic. That's what a lot of people say when they get cavities despite brushing daily or when their children have dental problems at a young age. I just have bad teeth, it runs in the family. And while genetics do play a role, this myth overstates their influence. Dental health is far more shaped by habits, environment, and care than by your DNA. Let's start with what is genetic. Some people inherit traits like enamel thickness, tooth shape, or alignment issues. Others may have a genetic predisposition to lower saliva production or certain immune responses that affect gum health. But these inherited factors don't guarantee dental problems. They just change the conditions, not the outcome. What really determines whether someone gets cavities, gum disease, or tooth loss is how they care for their mouth. Diet, brushing habits, flossing, fluoride exposure, dental visits, and tobacco use all matter more than genes. Someone with strong teeth, who never brushes, can end up worse off than someone with weak teeth who practices perfect hygiene. The myth persists because we like simple explanations. It's easier to blame biology than take responsibility or examine daily habits. It also gives people a way to explain inherited behaviors. If your parents didn't teach you good oral care, or if sugary foods were common at home, you may grow up thinking dental problems are unavoidable. In reality, most cases of bad teeth are preventable. Regular brushing, flossing, fluoride toothpaste, avoiding sugary snacks, drinking water instead of soda, and seeing a dentist twice a year can drastically reduce dental issues, regardless of genetics. Even if you do inherit less than ideal dental traits, modern dentistry can correct or manage them. Braces, sealants, mouth guards, and deep cleanings all level the playing field. So while your teeth may look like your parents', their future is in your hands. Genetics load the gun, but habits pull the trigger. You're not doomed by your DNA. You're shaped by your routine. Women have lower pain tolerance than men. That's a common belief, especially in cultures that associate toughness with masculinity. People point to sports injuries, labor jobs, or military training and conclude that men are simply built to handle more pain. But science tells a more complicated story. In reality, women often experience pain more intensely, but that doesn't mean they're less tolerant. The difference lies in biology, hormones, reporting styles, and even societal expectations. Pain is subjective. It's not just about nerves firing, it's also about how the brain interprets those signals. Studies have shown that women are more likely to report pain and seek treatment, while men often underreport pain due to cultural pressure to appear strong. That skews perception. On a physiological level, women have more nerve receptors in their skin, which can make them more sensitive to certain types of pain, like touch or temperature changes. But when it comes to endurance, like during childbirth, women demonstrate incredible resilience. Labor is one of the most intense forms of pain a human can experience, and yet billions of women have gone through it without medication. That's not a low tolerance, that's unmatched durability. Hormones also play a role. Estrogen and progesterone affect how women feel and process pain, sometimes amplifying it, other times buffering it. Pain sensitivity can vary across the menstrual cycle, making it harder to measure consistently. Men, influenced by testosterone, may experience pain differently, not necessarily better or worse. What's more, women are more likely to suffer from chronic pain conditions like fibromyalgia, migraines, or autoimmune disorders. This leads to a frustrating paradox. Women report more pain, but are often dismissed more quickly in clinical settings. They're labeled as exaggerating or emotional, even when they have legitimate symptoms. The myth that women have lower pain tolerance isn't just wrong, it's harmful. It influences how doctors treat patients, how people perceive suffering, and how pain is managed across genders. Pain tolerance isn't about gender. It's about individual biology, psychology, and context. And in many ways, women carry more pain and more strength than they're ever given credit for. A black cat crossing your path is bad luck. That belief has existed for centuries and still lingers today in many cultures. It's so widespread that even people who don't believe in superstitions sometimes hesitate when they see a black cat dash in front of them. But why does this innocent animal carry such a heavy curse? The origin of the myth dates back to the Middle Ages in Europe, where black cats were often associated with witchcraft. People believed that witches could transform into black cats, or that these animals were their demonic familiars. The church fueled this fear by linking anything outside the religious norm with evil forces. During the witch hunts of the 16th and 17th centuries, black cats were killed alongside accused women, reinforcing the idea that they brought misfortune. This fear eventually embedded itself in Western folklore. In some cultures, especially in the US and parts of Europe, a black cat crossing your path was said to block your connection to the divine or turn your fortune sour. It became a symbol of death, misfortune, or coming doom. But here's the irony: in many parts of the world, black cats are actually good luck. In Japan and Scotland, for example, a black cat arriving at your doorstep is considered a blessing. Sailors once believed black cats on board brought calm seas and safe voyages. In ancient Egypt, cats of all colors were sacred, especially black ones linked to the goddess Bastet. Scientifically, there's absolutely no reason to believe a black cat has any impact on your luck. A cat's fur color doesn't change the universe's response to your life. They don't control fate, they chase insects, nap in sunbeams, and sometimes cross roads. That's all. The superstition survives because humans crave patterns and explanations for random events. If something bad happens after you see a black cat, your brain might connect the two, even though it's just coincidence. Confirmation bias keeps the myth alive, and pop culture doesn't help, with Halloween decorations, horror movies, and media often reinforcing the idea that black cats are ominous. But the truth is, black cats are no different from other cats. They're playful, curious, and affectionate. In fact, due to the myth, they're less likely to be adopted, which is the real tragedy. So next time a black cat crosses your path, smile. You just saw a beautiful animal, not a curse. All snakes are venomous. That's what many people assume when they see a snake slither by. Panic kicks in, and they treat every snake like a deadly threat. But this belief isn't just wrong, it fuels unnecessary fear, animal killings, and misunderstandings about nature. The truth is, out of over 3,000 species of snakes in the world, only around 600 are venomous. That means roughly 80% of snakes are completely harmless to humans. Most of them would rather avoid you than attack. They strike only when cornered or threatened, and even venomous species don't always inject venom when they bite. The myth likely comes from survival instincts. Humans are naturally wary of snakes because a few species can be dangerous, and avoiding them altogether was once a good evolutionary strategy. Better safe than sorry. But over time, that caution turned into blanket fear, the idea that any snake might kill you. Movies, myths, and exaggerated news stories only made it worse. Venomous snakes like cobras, vipers, and rattlesnakes get all the attention, while the harmless ones like garter snakes, corn snakes, or rat snakes are ignored or mistaken for killers. To clarify, venom is not the same as poison. Venom must be injected like through a bite, while poison is harmful when ingested or touched. So calling a snake poisonous is usually incorrect unless you plan to eat it raw. Venomous snakes use their venom primarily to subdue prey, not to attack humans. Their bites can be serious, but antivenom, medical treatment, and awareness have drastically lowered fatality rates. In the US, for example, fewer than 5 people die from snake bites each year, despite thousands of bites reported. Harmless snakes actually help ecosystems. They control pests, maintain balance, and pose no danger to you. Killing every snake out of fear harms biodiversity and disrupts the environment. The best defense is education. Learn which snakes are native to your region, how to identify them, and how to avoid risky encounters. Most snakes don't want to fight, they want to flee. So no, not all snakes are venomous. Most are just misunderstood. Stepping on a rusty nail gives you tetanus. That's one of the first things people hear as kids when they step on something sharp. Go get a tetanus shot, it's rusty. The image is so vivid. Rust equals danger, infection, and deadly bacteria. But while the fear isn't totally misplaced, the connection is misunderstood. Tetanus is caused by a bacterium called Clostridium tetani, not by rust. The bacteria are commonly found in soil, dust, and manure, not just on rusty metal. When these bacteria enter the body through a deep wound, especially one with low oxygen like a puncture, they can release a toxin that affects the nervous system, leading to muscle stiffness, spasms, and in severe cases, death. Rust itself doesn't carry tetanus. It just happens to be found on the kind of objects that can cause deep, dirty wounds like old nails, farm equipment, or neglected tools. These objects often sit in soil or unclean environments, which increases the chance they're contaminated. That's why the myth stuck. It's not about the rust, it's about the environment and the depth of the wound. A clean nail in a hospital floor is less risky than a dirty thorn in a farm field. The type of wound matters too. Scratches or surface cuts are less likely to lead to tetanus, but puncture wounds where bacteria can be trapped inside are higher risk. That's why doctors emphasize tetanus shots after injuries like these, regardless of whether the object was rusty. Vaccination is key. Most people in developed countries receive tetanus shots in childhood, followed by boosters every 10 years. These vaccines are incredibly effective at preventing the disease, so if you're up to date, stepping on a nail, even a rusty one, is unlikely to harm you. Still, it's wise to clean any wound, monitor for infection, and consult a doctor if you're unsure about your immunization status. The myth exaggerates the danger of rust and ignores the real threat: bacteria in contaminated environments. Don't fear the color of the metal, fear the lack of a booster. So the next time someone says rust causes tetanus, you'll know better. It's not the rust, it's the biology. Leaving onions in a room purifies the air. That's a folk remedy that's been passed down for generations. The story goes like this: cut an onion in half, leave it by your bedside or in a bowl in the corner, and it'll absorb bacteria, viruses, or toxins from the air. People claim it prevents colds, clears out the flu, or makes a sick room cleaner overnight. But as comforting as that idea sounds, science doesn't back it up. Onions contain sulfur compounds, especially when chopped, and those do have antimicrobial properties, but only in direct contact, not through the air. What that means is if you rub onion juice directly onto a bacteria-covered surface, it might have a mild disinfecting effect. But placing an onion in the corner of a room does absolutely nothing to purify the air. Airborne bacteria and viruses don't get sucked into vegetables. And even if they did, the onion would need an active mechanism, like airflow, heat, or filters, to trap and destroy those particles. That's what real air purifiers do. This myth likely began centuries ago during times of disease outbreaks like the plague, when people were desperate for protection. In the absence of medical knowledge, they relied on strong-smelling plants like onions and garlic to ward off bad air, which they believed carried disease. These beliefs got passed down even as science moved forward. But the truth is, if onions were that effective, hospitals would use them instead of HEPA filters. The only real thing that happens when you leave a cut onion in a room is that it starts to rot, releasing strong odors and possibly growing bacteria itself. That's not purification, that's spoilage. If anything, it could make the air worse over time. And no, onions don't magically become toxic overnight either, as some variations of the myth suggest. They're just vegetables, not air vacuums or disease sponges. To actually improve indoor air, use ventilation, HEPA filters, plants that assist with air quality and good hygiene. Onions belong in meals, not in corners. Swallowing seeds grows plants in your stomach. That's a myth many kids hear from parents trying to keep them from eating watermelon or apple seeds. The idea is often said as a joke, don't swallow that or you'll grow a tree inside you. But it's also repeated seriously by people who believe it could actually happen. Let's be clear, seeds do not grow in stomachs. That's biologically impossible. Seeds need specific conditions to germinate: warmth, water, soil, and light. The human stomach is dark, highly acidic, and constantly churning. It's designed to digest things, not nurture them. Any seed that ends up there is rapidly broken down by stomach acid, enzymes, and muscular contractions. Even if a seed passed through the stomach unharmed, it wouldn't sprout in the digestive tract. There's no sunlight, no proper soil, and no sustained environment for roots or stems. You'd pass the seed long before it had any chance to do anything. The myth might come from rare but misunderstood cases of seeds appearing to sprout in unusual places, like lungs or sinuses, after being inhaled. These cases are extremely rare and often debated, but they involve moisture and air exposure, not stomachs. What fuels the myth further is how vivid it sounds. You can picture it, a watermelon vine growing up through someone's throat, leaves sticking out their mouth. It's a powerful image that sticks in your mind, even though it makes no sense. It also plays into childhood fears and the idea that food can betray you if you don't eat it the right way. The truth is, you've probably swallowed dozens of seeds in your lifetime, from fruits, vegetables, even bread, and nothing ever sprouted. That's because your body is a digestive system, not a greenhouse. If you want something to grow, stick it in the ground. Your stomach will take care of the rest by destroying it. Smiling in the morning makes your day better. It's one of those feel-good ideas that sounds harmless and optimistic. The claim is that even if you don't feel happy, forcing a smile when you wake up can trigger positive emotions, change your mindset, and set the tone for a better day. And surprisingly, this one isn't entirely a myth, but it's often oversimplified. Let's break it down. There's some truth to the idea that facial expressions can influence emotions. It's called the facial feedback hypothesis. The theory is that when you smile, even artificially, the muscles involved send signals to the brain that can reinforce or even generate positive feelings. Several studies have explored this, some showing that smiling while watching something neutral or unpleasant can make people rate the experience more positively. But the effect is small, and the science is mixed. A major replication crisis in psychology has cast doubt on earlier findings. Some studies failed to reproduce the results, while others suggest the context matters a lot, whether you're alone, whether you're being observed, and whether the smile feels natural or forced. Smiling doesn't magically erase problems. If you're dealing with stress, anxiety, or depression, forcing a grin in the mirror isn't going to change your brain chemistry in any meaningful way. In fact, pretending to be happy when you're not can make things worse for some people. It can feel fake, frustrating, or exhausting. The idea that a smile can cure a bad mood sets up unrealistic expectations. But that doesn't mean there's no benefit. Mindful actions like stretching, stepping into sunlight, or smiling gently to yourself can create microshifts in how you feel. They're like nudges, small signals that you're trying to reset. When paired with other habits like gratitude journaling, light movement, or calming music, they can help steer your mood, not override it. So yes, smiling in the morning can help a little. But it's not a magic button. It works best when it's genuine or when it's part of a larger ritual that respects your emotional state. Your day doesn't depend on your facial muscles, but they might give it a tiny boost if you let them. Eating fast makes you gain weight. This belief has become common advice from nutritionists, parents, and fitness influencers alike. The claim is that the speed at which you eat directly impacts how much weight you gain. And while it might sound exaggerated at first, there's a solid foundation behind it. When you eat quickly, your brain doesn't get the signal that you're full until it's too late. It takes about 20 minutes for the gut to communicate satiety to the brain via hormones like leptin and peptide YY. If you finished your entire plate in 10 minutes, your body hasn't had time to realize it's had enough. So you may eat more than you actually need, and that excess adds up over time. Multiple studies support this. People who eat slowly tend to consume fewer calories and report feeling more satisfied after meals. Fast eaters, on the other hand, often end up going back for seconds or snacking soon after. But it's not just about calories. Fast eating also affects how your body processes food. Eating rapidly leads to less chewing, larger food particles, and less saliva mixing, which can impair digestion. It may also spike your blood sugar more sharply, especially with carb-heavy meals. That kind of pattern over time can contribute to insulin resistance and fat storage. Additionally, fast eaters are more likely to be overweight or obese, according to several population studies. One possible explanation is that eating quickly becomes a habit tied to lifestyle stress or distraction. Many people eat in front of screens while driving or during short lunch breaks, and that environment encourages rushing. But there's another layer. People who eat fast often don't enjoy food as much. They don't savor the flavors, textures, or smells, they just consume. That disconnect makes food feel less satisfying, which can lead to cravings and overeating later on. Slowing down isn't just about weight, it's about presence. Eating mindfully, chewing slowly, pausing between bites, paying attention to fullness helps regulate appetite and strengthens your connection to hunger cues. So yes, eating fast can make you gain weight, not because speed is fattening, but because it blinds you to your own body's signals. The fix is simple but powerful: slow down. Jumping helps get water out of your ears. Everyone's done it at least once. You come out of the pool or shower, feel that weird squish in your ear, and immediately start hopping on one foot while tilting your head. The idea is that gravity and motion will force the water to drain out. It's so common it feels instinctive. But does it actually work? Kind of, but not in the way people think. Jumping may help dislodge some water if it's already near the edge of the ear canal. But more often than not, the water is trapped deeper, sealed in by surface tension or blocked by wax. When you jump, the sudden force might create enough jostling to break the surface seal, but it's hit or miss. In fact, jumping can sometimes make things worse. Vigorous hopping and slapping your head can irritate the ear, jam wax deeper, or even cause dizziness, especially in kids. That pressure and movement don't always release the water, they can just make you more uncomfortable. A better method: use gravity with suction. Tilt your head to the side, tug gently on your earlobe, or lie down with the affected ear facing down. Yawning or chewing motions can also help move the ear canal and encourage drainage. Some people use a hairdryer on a low setting to evaporate moisture, but this should be done carefully to avoid burns. Alcohol-based eardrops can also dry out trapped water, but they're not for everyone, especially those with ear infections or sensitive skin. The real danger isn't the water itself, it's what can happen if it stays trapped. Prolonged moisture in the ear creates a breeding ground for bacteria, leading to swimmer's ear, an outer ear infection that causes itching, redness, and pain. That's why it's important to dry your ears gently and thoroughly. So while jumping might help in some cases, it's far from a guaranteed fix. It's more tradition than science. You're better off using gentler, safer methods to get that water out. Opening windows at night causes colds. That idea is so common in households around the world that people will argue over it before bedtime. One person wants fresh air, the other warns, you'll catch a cold. The underlying belief is that exposure to cool night air weakens your immune system and makes you sick. But here's the truth: colds are caused by viruses, not by temperature. You do catch cold from being cold. Rhinoviruses and other cold-causing viruses spread through respiratory droplets from person to person. They enter your body through your nose, mouth, or eyes after you touch contaminated surfaces or breathe infected air. The confusion likely comes from the fact that colds do tend to be more common in colder months. But that's not because of the temperature itself, it's due to behavior. In winter, people stay indoors more, in closed spaces with less ventilation, making it easier for viruses to spread. The air also becomes drier, which can dry out nasal passages and make it easier for viruses to latch on. Opening a window at night, especially in a stuffy room, can actually improve your chances of staying healthy. Fresh air dilutes airborne pathogens and reduces the risk of inhaling high concentrations of virus particles. Good airflow matters. That said, being cold can affect your body's defenses in subtle ways. If your body is stressed by extreme cold, it might be temporarily less efficient at fighting off invaders. But this doesn't mean cold air causes illness. It just means your body is working a bit harder to regulate itself. You're still perfectly safe sleeping in a cool room if you're warm and dry. The real danger is poor hygiene, not open windows. Wash your hands, clean surfaces, and avoid close contact with sick people. So no, opening a window at night doesn't cause colds. That's a myth. If anything, it might help prevent them by giving your lungs a break from stale, recycled air. Dreams always mean something. That's a belief rooted in ancient cultures, spiritual traditions, and even modern psychology. The idea is that dreams aren't just random images, but messages, hidden truths about your desires, fears, or future. Books claim to decode symbols like flying, teeth falling out, or being chased, and dream dictionaries still sell today. But is it true that dreams always carry meaning? Not exactly. Most scientists agree that dreams are complex mental events shaped by memory, emotion, and random brain activity. During REM sleep, when most vivid dreams occur, your brain is highly active, almost like you're awake, but it's not receiving external input. Instead, it's replaying internal signals, bits of memories, emotional fragments, and subconscious associations. Your brain stitches these into a narrative because it's wired to create patterns and stories. That doesn't mean every dream is symbolic. Sometimes, a dream is just the mind's attempt to make sense of noise. If you dream about your boss turning into a banana, it might not represent anything. It could be your brain merging unrelated thoughts while you sleep. However, that doesn't mean dreams are always meaningless. Strong emotions from waking life, anxiety, love, fear, often leak into your dreams. If you're stressed about an exam, you might dream about forgetting your homework. That's not magic, it's your brain processing feelings. Sigmund Freud famously believed dreams reveal hidden desires, especially repressed sexual ones. Carl Jung took a different view, saying they reflect universal symbols and personal growth. Modern psychology is more cautious. Therapists may explore recurring dreams or nightmares to understand emotional states, but they don't treat dream content as secret codes. What gives a dream meaning is how you interpret it. If a dream helps you reflect on your behavior or emotions, that's valuable, even if the dream itself wasn't designed to teach you something. The myth comes from our need to find significance in strange experiences. Dreams feel vivid and real, so we assume they must matter, but sometimes they're just the brain talking to itself in its own weird language. So no, dreams don't always mean something, but that doesn't stop us from listening. Eating chocolate warms you up. This is a common belief in colder seasons, that chocolate, especially dark or hot chocolate, can increase body heat or make you feel physically warmer. The idea is so widespread that some people reach for a chocolate bar during cold weather, convinced it'll heat their body from the inside. But is there truth to this? Not really. Eating chocolate doesn't actually raise your core body temperature in any significant way. Your body's warmth is regulated primarily by your metabolism and environment, not specific foods. That said, there are a few reasons this myth feels true. First, chocolate contains sugar and fat, two high-calorie substances. When digested, they provide energy, and in some cases, metabolizing food can produce a small amount of heat, known as diet-induced thermogenesis. But this effect is minimal, far too small to make you feel warmer. The bigger factor is perception. Chocolate, especially hot chocolate, creates a comforting, cozy sensation. Drinking a warm liquid does help raise internal temperature temporarily, and the emotional association with chocolate enhances the feeling of warmth. Cocoa also contains compounds like theobromine and phenylethylamine, which can slightly elevate mood and alertness. That uplift can make you feel better, which people often associate with feeling physically warmer, even if it's not happening biologically. There's also the nostalgia effect. Many people grew up drinking hot chocolate during winter, bundled in blankets or by the fireplace. That memory lingers and reinforces the belief that chocolate equals warmth. But in practical, physiological terms, chocolate is not a thermal agent. If you're cold, you'll be better off with layers, movement, or actual hot fluids. Chocolate can make you feel good, but it won't warm your body from the inside out. The warmth you feel is real, but it's emotional, not biological, and that's still worth something. Salt in shoes absorbs moisture. It's a trick passed down in households, travel forums, and DIY guides. Sprinkle some salt in your shoes overnight and it'll dry them out. The logic seems simple. Salt is a desiccant, right? It dries things. But when it comes to damp shoes, this isn't exactly a miracle cure. Yes, salt can absorb some moisture, that's why it clumps in humid environments. But its capacity is limited, and it's not the most effective or safe way to dry out shoes. Salt draws moisture from the air by forming brine, but in shoes, especially ones made from fabric, foam, or leather, the absorbed water is inside the material, not just sitting on the surface. Salt won't pull that deep moisture out, and it won't do it quickly. Worse, leaving salt in your shoes can damage them. Salt is corrosive. It can degrade leather, discolor fabrics, and even irritate your skin if residue remains. It's also messy and leaves behind granules that are hard to clean. A far better solution is using newspaper or silica gel packs. They absorb internal moisture more effectively and safely. For persistent dampness, using a fan, a shoe dryer, or simply removing insoles and letting the shoes air out is much more reliable. The salt trick may come from a confusion with how salt is used in food preservation or icy roads. In those cases, salt pulls moisture or melts ice, but that doesn't translate well to shoe care. It's also possible the myth survives because it feels cheap and easy. People like quick fixes. And if you've ever used salt and thought it worked, you might credit the salt when in reality the shoes just dried over time. So no, salt in your shoes isn't a magic drying agent. It's an old home remedy that might do more harm than good. If your shoes are wet, use tools designed for drying, not kitchen seasonings. If you believe hard enough, it becomes true. This myth has woven itself deeply into motivational culture, self-help books, and even spiritual traditions. The message is seductive, that your thoughts alone can shape reality, that if your belief is strong enough, the world will bend to your will. It's a comforting idea, empowering, uplifting, and deeply human, but it's not entirely true. Belief is powerful, yes. It can change how you behave, how you perceive the world, and how persistent you are in pursuit of a goal. The placebo effect proves that expectation can influence the body. People who believe they're receiving medicine sometimes experience real symptom relief, even when given a sugar pill. Athletes visualize winning, and that mental rehearsal can improve performance. Students who believe they're capable often perform better, but belief isn't magic. It doesn't override physical laws, erase obstacles, or replace effort. You can't believe your way into flying without wings, or into curing a disease without treatment. The danger of this myth lies in its oversimplification. It implies that if something doesn't come true, it's because you didn't believe hard enough, placing the blame on you, not on chance, complexity, or reality. It can cause people to ignore facts, deny diagnoses, or stay in dangerous situations, thinking their belief alone will fix everything. In extreme forms, this idea becomes toxic positivity, the pressure to stay hopeful even when things are objectively wrong. It encourages magical thinking instead of critical thinking. It turns failures into moral weakness instead of learning experiences. That doesn't mean belief is useless. Far from it, belief can spark action. It can give you the strength to keep going when things are tough. It can shift your mindset, open doors, and make you more resilient. But it works best when paired with strategy, action, and adaptation. Think of belief like a match. It can light a fire, but it won't cook a meal by itself. Reality is shaped by effort, not just imagination. So no, belief alone doesn't make something true. But belief paired with discipline, knowledge, and persistence, that's a force to be reckoned with.